this. Let's see. Camera overlay. Here I am. Welcome to Ice and Fire and sex ed and abortion and circumcision and whatever we end up always talking about. But Ice and Fire. Let's see. Right from the start here, we have. This is good. We can start talking about Areo a little. This is probably the most anyone has ever thought about Areo Hotah. The past, who thought would be thinking and dwelling on Areo Hotah so much when literally I don't even know if George R. Martin dwells on Areo Hotah that much. If they were just going to kill Balon Swan, why the pretense of chasing Darkstar to High Hermitage just to exhaust the ravens he brought? Why not just kill him and his party soon after Sunspear? So the big thing about Darkstar and House Dayne is that, Doran seems to have a touchy political issue with House Dayne that he wants. If he just killed Darkstar immediately, he's not achieving his political end goals with House Dayne. And the main thing, and I got to bring up a map here of the South, which I had ready for any talk of the Westerlands. All right, so we know that House Dayne, the sister of Ned Dayne, is betrothed to Beric Dondarrion. And Beric Dondarrion himself has Ned Dayne as a ward, squire, hostage. So any movements that anybody does north would have to go against House Blackhaven, who is aligned with Starfall and House Dayne. You can't do anything. You can't invade and head north without taking Blackhaven because it's in the Bone Way. And so there's some, and since Ned Dayne is in Beric Dondarrion's possession, there's no way that House Dayne is going to go along with anything here. Now, the exact, how Doran is working things and everything, I don't necessarily have it all down, but that is the political issue that he wants to make at least Darkstar and House Dayne look like they are guilty of causing harm to the Lannisters in order to try to either get them on board or have them killed off or something. It's going to be part of his. One could say, well, the Danes aren't Roynish, so does Doran really care about them, or is he trying to throw them out there like House Ironwood, or does he want to pull them in? I haven't quite figured it out, but there is a political issue here, a very important political issue with Starfall, and his hosts are here in the Bone Way and the Prince's Pass, and that Night Song has a whole issue with the bastard who is on Dragonstone right now. So these issues need to be pulled in and dealt with these two armies. But it's not completely down, but I'll figure it out. But the idea is that Doran wanted to blame and wanted to frame Darkstar, a Dane, for the murders of Balon Swan, and he already framed him for cutting Myrcella. Right? So this idea that the Danes are being hostile to the Lannisters when they're not being hostile to the Lannisters seems to be in Doran's mind. Now, how did he know that Obara Sand was going to do what she was going to do? Well, he seeded it pretty obviously. He said, "Oh, Darkstar is a monster. Balon Swan is a monster. He's totally guilty of trying to kill Trystane, and then he sends him off into the desert with Obara Sand, a woman who wants to take revenge on everybody at all times. So it seems that, even before the Areo Hotah chapter, I would say, man, Doran Martell wants Obara Sand to kill Balon Swan. Like, why accuse a man of attempted murder and then send him off into the desert with Obara Sand? Like, it really sounds like he wanted him murdered. And the whole blame it on Darkstar thing, well, that was also seeded because in the Watcher dinner, they talk about how they're just gonna blame everything. Like they blame the killing of Aerys Oakheart on Darkstar. Why not just blame everything on Darkstar? So of course Obara is going to come to that same conclusion. I can do anything and just blame it on Darkstar. I don't know. Does that answer everything? But I think it's important that they get near High Hermitage to be able to say that it's a Darkstar ambush and things like that. But yeah. Thank you, Arthur. Let's see here. Preston, did my comment about Alleras being trans inspire the addition of the fact that the prologue maester is supposed to have a big crush on him? It wasn't that. I think it was on my mind because of something else. I don't really want to bring up exactly what it was because I don't want to call attention to somebody. But I was thinking about a different kind of gender bending thing that I saw on Twitter. But that's what kind of came to my mind. But I did think it was just kind of funny because I did think about, well, all of the sand snakes are very sexual. Shouldn't Sorella Sand be sexual? Like, her mother is from this very sexually liberated culture of the shit. The Islanders, the Southern Islanders. No. Shit. Why am I blanking? I'm sure someone will yell at me. It's so funny, like being put on the spot and then having my brain fart on so many different things like this. But her mother is from this sexually liberated culture, and her father is Auburn Martell. Her sisters are all sexually liberated. It's Dorne in general. Like, she's a 19-year-old girl in college, 20-year-old girl in college. Like, wouldn't she be looking to have, some sort of excitement or fun? Everything that we know about her, it's just kind of the perfect thing, and it's just kind of funny and weird. That this guy, but let's see here. Everybody's checking their time. I live on this mindset of Washington D.C. and Taipei, which is kind of easy for me because it's currently 12-hour difference. So it's just like it's 10 a.m. in Taipei, it's 10 p.m. in Washington D.C. So, why can't he just say, "Hey, Obara, kill the Lannister guys"? Well, it's Doran. He's using all of his pawns. And keep in mind that, like, Obara is a bit disposable to Doran, and the fact that she's like, so. Why not be direct with her? I don't know. Why did Balon Swan, like, keep so many secrets from Arianne for so many years and leave a letter out and all sorts of things? I think he wants to move his pieces. Also, I think there's the issue of Hotah himself and stuff like that. If he just says, "Hey, kill these Lannister guys," everybody looks kind of guilty, and they can question Doran's pure motives. I think it's in his best interest at this moment, or he thinks it's in his best interest to make everybody think that he's not this big player and he's just waiting and so I don't know. I mean, why not be direct? I mean, it's Ice and Fire. Why can't anybody be direct? I mean, I take it. It's a good point. Like, why aren't these people more direct with each other? And it's like, well, yeah, it's kind of a story. Preston was rewatching She's the Man. I think that was part of it too. We had a discussion. Wasn't there a live stream? Like, maybe not the last live stream, but the live stream before, where we were talking about She's the Man and how it's such a weird movie. There was a whole bunch of other movies. There's one in the 80s starring did you guys ever see Lucky Louie or Louie, like the Louis C.K. show? And he's got this Italian American woman that he's married to in Lucky Louie, and she's his friend and somewhat romantic interest in Louis. It's like her as a teenager, and she wishes to be a boy, and she literally like wakes up like one morning and has a penis, and like she goes to school and pretends, and has to be a boy, and some dude falls in love with her, and there's a lot of these like weird high school 12th night kind of stories that they like to redo over. I think it was called Something Special. Now that I think about it, Something Special. There's a lot of these weird movies of like, well, if you're attracted to somebody and you think they're a woman, and then you get together with them and they happen to have a penis, like, what does that mean about your sexuality? Well, who knows? I know several people that had incidences in Thailand where they went home with people that they thought, they went home with someone that they thought was and now all of our terms are messy here, but they went home with someone who they thought had a vagina, and in turn, in the end, they didn't have a vagina, and they were quite surprised and left quite shocked. That happened to like a few people I know. Are there any real-life topics you and Carmine analyze as thoroughly as Ice and Fire, be it history, politics, science, etc.? These are these things. Do you know that Carmine is like really into cooking? Like, he really knows cooking. But I don't really know cooking that well. Like, he's really, really into cooking. Like, he watches cooking channels and like practices cooking all day. He's also really into manga. And it's like, I'm only somewhat into manga, so I can't really keep up on what he knows. There's a bunch of things that I have random knowledge about, but he's not necessarily like in on. Like, for some reason, I know a lot about Roman history and Spanish history and Chinese history, and I do know a lot about certain political issues. I do know a lot about abortion. I do. There's a lot of random issues that I know a lot about, but they don't match up with what Carmine knows a lot about. So we get into these things in live stream, but it's in the end, like, the things that both of us really know is like probably Star Wars and Marvel and Ice and Fire. Is Smitty still banned? No, he's not banned. He can come on anytime. Yeah, economics. I mean, I majored in economics and have a master's degree in it, so I know a lot. I can talk about economics about a bit. There's just kind of really random issues that I know a lot about the Middle East. I lived there for 4 years. I know a lot about Islam, and a lot of like, I actually know a lot about the Bible and religion. This is a funny story because because I'm an atheist, and um, some of my friends, you know, are more agnostic or you know, lapsed Catholics or whatever. And I remember I used to do a lot of pub trivia in my 20s and early 30s. And it's funny because you kind of like, certain people have like the thing they're into and good at. But the thing is a lot of people are really like, sometimes I'm really good at geography, but a lot of people are really good at geography. So I'm not special on a pub trivia team. Um, and so like some people are really good at college sports, you know, and stuff like that. So like the thing that I would have all the knowledge on that everybody else wouldn't would be religion. Like people would be like, oh, like, you know, what book was the writing on the wall in the Bible or something? And like, you know, like, and I'd be like, how do you guys not know this? Like you guys went to church, like, you know. Um, by the way, if you ever do pub trivia, make sure you always have like one English major because they will kill it on like poetry and stuff. You usually need somebody that knows a lot about 70s music. Um, he likes moving his pieces around. He's forgotten why. This is kind of very true about Doran and George R. Martin and maybe me. I think he like came up sometimes comes up with an idea and then maybe forgets like where it all goes. But it does if you like. Sometimes I really forget about things. Like here's a question on Frey Civil War. Like I really am proud of my Frey Civil War video, but it's so complicated that I often forget what I said in it. And so I'll rewatch it and I'll be like, oh right, no, that's totally true. That's totally right. Okay. And then I'll finish it and be like, wait, what did I fucking say in that? Like, um, but yeah, the in Frey Civil War you conclude through process of elimination that Olivar is the great uncle in Darry. Isn't it more likely that it's a bastard Frey like Martin or Ronald Rivers? Hmm. Um. That's a good question here. And there's also a question of like when somebody's a bastard, like do you call them a half uncle? But let's see here. Martin Rivers. Um let's see here. Martin seems like he's actually rather useful, and is you know there is the question of whether or not, like with a lot of these phrases, there's the question of whether or not they're going to have a place at the twins if they're useful enough, um, and if they're not useful enough, then they've got to find some other place to reside. Martin Rivers seems somewhat useful. I mean, it's always possible. Let's see here. Um, Fourth place captured at the Green Fork. Ransomed. Ronald is among the phrase. Yeah, Ronald though. Ronald seems a little useless. Hmm. Uh, that's a fairly good point. I mean, I hadn't thought of when they said half uncle if it could actually be a bastard. Um, and Ronald specifically, Martin Rivers seems useful enough that they would keep him around at the Twins, but Ronald Rivers seems like a fuck up. Yeah, okay, that's a good point. It could possibly be Ronald instead of Oliver. Um, yeah. Um, Thanks for being awesome. Dan Ramirez is asking a good one. Can you speak on how Project Sweet Robin and George R. R. Martin sample chapters line up? Yeah. I've thought about this a bit. Um, so George, and this is kind of a problem with. I would say if there's a big weakness to A Feast for Crows is that, A Storm of Swords ends at a certain point, and A Feast for Crows begins, and you've got all of these new characters and other plot lines going on that happen before the end of A Storm of Swords, and it's hard to get into the book at first because you're wondering who these characters are. You want to see what happens next, like where you left off in A Storm of Swords. And A Feast for Crows takes a long time to get going. I think A Feast for Crows is fantastic on the reread, but I admit that like my first time through it, it was really striking and off-putting to be like, wait, why am I reading about Aeron? Why am I reading about Areo Hotah? And why is it taking so long to get to the aftermath of what we saw in A Storm of Swords? And I think the same problem is happening with The Winds of Winter. So the epilogue is the first day of winter, and that's a pretty firm moment. And so we want to know what happens like after that, right? And we kind of know that like Jon getting stabbed at the walls around the same time and all these sorts of things. But the problem is that like we go back in time again, and we have at least 2 Arion chapters before the first day of winter. And we have at least 2 Elaine chapters before the first day of winter, where Elaine 1 is specifically said to still be in the autumn, which means you could have Elaine 2 be the first day of winter, but we're still having like, that's 4, that's 4 chapters by themselves, like getting back there. In fact, I would say that even a 3rd Arion chapter would have to happen to be close to the first day of winter. So when I think about like but then she also Ariane also talks about how Areo Hotah would be at High Hermitage by now. So you need to have an Areo Hotah chapter before the first day of winter, and all of these other things like filling in before you even get to the big news. Jon Con has arrived. Like, the first day of winter is a huge thing. Like Kevin's dead, Pycelle is dead, Jon Con is rolling over Westeros like at breakneck speed. Like these are big things, but so much has to happen before. So I do think the Winds of like the Sweet Robin Project and the Winds of Winter here, and this would be for the real Winds of Winter, is that it would begin with a lot of chapters where like multiple chapters before you get to the first day of winter. So like I see like at least 2 Arion chapters, at least 2 Hotah chapters, at least probably all 3 Arion chapters would be like very early in the story. And then like who else? Like then we'd have to have multiple chapters from their perspective, maybe a Jon Con, maybe a Samwell, and then you'd have the first day of winter, and then you could deal with stuff like Cersei and the Mercy chapter, going forward. Now you could also like Jaime's been missing for like 2, maybe 3 weeks before the first day of winter, so probably one of him or Brienne chapter would be early on too, dealing with that. So it's kind of weird that all of these other perspectives are having all of these events happening before you can kind of even them out to get to the chapters that people kind of care about, because people really care about the North and Cersei and stuff like that, but they're not really necessary until until all of these other chapters have had multiple shots. I think probably even Aeron would be early on too. So I do think it's not as spread out as if you actually really want to go chronologically that it should be. The only, I mean, Feast for Crows had that problem. Also, A Storm of Swords is really weird in that the Dany chapters should actually all happen at once together and not be spread out, because just timeline wise. But we just kind of tolerate it because Dany's often, a completely different realm. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I've tried to make a little list of where I think these chapters should go. I even think probably you could probably have a Davos chapter super early too. Um, but all of the chapters that people are really excited about, like Battle of Ice, Battle of Fire, Cersei, would actually come later. Kind of like, like it's getting to the point where it's like, 25% into the book. Like, you have to deal with everybody else for a while. Um, let's see. Any interest in doing dunk and egg analysis videos? I mean, eventually, if a dunk and egg series goes forward, probably we'd probably get on that. I do have the She Wolves of Winterfell video, which I don't think it's very exciting for people, but I'm very proud of it because I think I actually like unraveled more or less what was going on in that story by looking at a family tree. I actually kind of like that video a lot, but I don't. It's not people's favorite because it's like why? It's because it's a bunch of random characters that they've never heard of. Um, the let's see here. Um, should House of the Dragon have the regency? The regency? I may need. Oh, you're talking about like later on with when during the Hour of the Wolf and then Corlys Velaryon um coming in. I think it will and should, but that's stuff that would happen in like season 3 or 4 or later. But I think it absolutely should. I think if I think probably what they're going to do with House of the Dragon, and we'll see, is so the Starks aren't really characters until much later on in the story. Like Hour of the Wolf is really like when the Starks come in, and that's really late. Like you're talking like having them be characters at season 3 at the earliest. So what you kind of need is well, I suppose you do the Pact of Ice and Fire. You could probably have that in season 2, but you need to establish like a Stark B story of what they're kind of doing up there. Just whether it's killing time, kind of like what they did with Theon, right? Or Theon or Jaime. Like they hired these actors for Theon and Jaime in Game of Thrones, but Theon isn't a character really in a Game of Thrones, and Jaime's not really a character, until I mean, not much of a character. He has a fight with Ned, and then he has his scene with Catelyn, but he's not really a character until the 3rd book. So they kind of invent scenes, they add extra scenes to give them time. They tried to give him a B story, the Theon Raz B story, in order to just put him on screen. So I think they're going to do the same sorts of things with House Stark and probably with Corlys Velaryon. Give them a little bit more screen time, give them some random scenes, some B story stuff. I guess we'll call it a Raz plot. They need to give they're going to give the Starks a Raz plot, and then in order to try to give them screen time, so that when they do become characters, like when they bring in the Pact of Ice and Fire, and then when they bring in like the Hour of the Wolf, like you won't be like, oh, who are these people? Plus, it's Game of Thrones. Like people are looking for the Starks, right? That's what they're looking for. I think they're definitely going to do the Regency. I think the question I think is more how much are they going to introduce the Starks and Corlys earlier on, to kind of prime people for that. Anyway, by the way, House of the Dragon has kind of they've kind of like already soft greenlit season 2. Like they're already telling the writers to like already work on your scripts for season 2. Like if House of the Dragon is a big failure, I mean, it's probably not going to be a failure. It's, you know, it's at least going to do okay. Um, then but so there's probably going to be a season 2, but they're already working on the scripts for season 2. It's given a soft green light. Where do you see the Lady Stoneheart story going? It's more about Brienne, you know. Brienne needs to kill Lady Stoneheart, you know, and Brienne to be liberated in the same sense as as Jaime. So I mean, I think that's mainly Lady Stoneheart is a mechanism, a vessel for Brienne's development. So I mean, I think, you know, she might try to kill some more Freys, things like that. But I think she only exists for Brienne's character development. I don't think she like is really. I understand that George R. R. Martin thinks she was really, really important, but I think she's really, really important in what she means to Brienne. Brienne needs to kill her, you know, to become a better person, because, you know, morality isn't true. Like good morality isn't dogmatic. You can't just phone it in and follow the moral code of somebody else, right? Like this is a big thing with George R. R. Martin. You can't just be like, I'm, you know, I follow that guy, because that's weak. It's lazy. And there's if that person does something horrible, you know, how can you justify what you're doing? So you can't, like, dogma is not the way to go. And Brienne is existing on a dogmatic like principle. Like she's just following what Catelyn wants her to do. And so she kind of has to become her own person and define her own morality. And so she needs to kill Lady Stoneheart, you know. So I think I have a question in chat. All right. Let's see. What were some of the bad adaptive changes you think were made in the good seasons of 1 to 4? I think it has always bothered me that Robb was planning to attack Casterly Rock instead of taking the north. Makes no sense. Oh, that's true. They even mess it up in the show, in the Red Wedding episode of Frey asks the Northmen heading back to Winterfell. So what Jesse's talking about is in the books, Robb finds out that Winterfell's been attacked, and he needs to reconquer the North, or else he just looks really bad. As they say, like, he's a king without a kingdom. And so he needs to go back, but Victarion has taken Moat Cailin, and so he needs to take Moat Cailin. So he builds up this huge plan, and of course, an announced plan never comes to fruition. So he comes up with this big plan to attack Moat Cailin by sneaking people through the swamps and coming in from the rear, and it doesn't happen because he's killed at the Red Wedding. Now, in the show, they kind of decided that Moat Cailin is not famous enough, you know? So if Robb is sitting on screen saying, I'm going to take Moat Cailin, everyone's going to be like, what? What are you talking about? So they switched it to Casterly Rock. And I remember like watching that scene the first time, and I think the scene is done really well. Like Robb is sitting in front of this map, and he's got these chess pieces, and he's like, I'm going to, you know, take Casterly Rock. Now, but, you know, you're right that in the grander scheme, it doesn't really make any sense. But I think for that scene on its own, it did kind of work. It just didn't work. Like, I guess they were thinking about it for the scene, and it worked for the scene, and it made that scene really good. But it didn't make sense in the larger story at all. but nonetheless, what are you gonna do? I understand why they did it. I kind of agree that everyone would be like, Moat Kalen. But what do I think didn't work in season 1 to 4 that they invented? I don't think Roz. Not that I didn't think the Roz actress was fantastic. She is, and but that plot was just useless. Didn't do anything. I think what stuff. I liked the stuff they added with Robert and Cersei. I thought that went really well. I'm trying to think of other stuff that was added. The Talisa Rob plots. I know that was added. I'm trying to think, like, that was really silly. It was really, really silly. Because why would there be this? Why would there be this like foreign nurse sassing kings on the middle of a battlefield? Like, it was so ridiculous. But at the same time, like, the two actors had really good chemistry, and you definitely felt like the lust in that situation with her. I think they probably could have had her beat Jane Westerling, though. I don't see why they needed to make her a Valentine, like, field doctor who was randomly abroad trying to help people and then insulting kings to their face. But I'm trying to think of any other like big early plots that were just kind of put together out of nowhere. There must have been something. John wanders around the north with Ygritte a little more and differently. I guess that went okay because they had real chemistry, but they had chemistry in real life, so they didn't even need to act. I think the Arya stuff was just kind of like a lot of wandering around. But I mean, I think they probably should have just kept on with the with I don't know, the Amory Lorch plots or something, or given more for the Brotherhood Without Banners to do. But they just kind of had her wander with the Hound a lot more. And they didn't really do anything. Like in the book, they actually like go to a village and live in this village for a while and then get kicked out. And there's kind of this statement about, how people like the Hound have no place to go and stuff like that. They were just kind of killing time. Daenerys Velaryon, how special do you think she is? She gets good press from the Maester's writing. Do you think she has a Dragon X gene, or maybe similar to Sansa? Let's see. Let's look up this. I have to look at the family tree. I mean, I don't know. Exactly her background here. Da, 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 da. Okay. Oh. Daenerys Velaryon. Okay. So Daenerys Velaryon is the daughter of a Daron Velaryon and a Hazel Hart, who is kind of a nobody. And then she marries Aegon III, and they go on and continue the Targaryen lineage. I think, what we kind of know is that, Aegon III has the nickname of like the Dragon Killer, Dragonbane, in a sense. Like he's the one in which all the dragons die under. And so the idea is if he or his children had anything like too special about them, the death of the dragons wouldn't have happened. So I think the implication is that Daenerys didn't have much special going on. I mean, Hazel Hart, her mother, is not going to be special. Um, Daron, if we're going with that situation, Daron could possibly have one Dragon X gene that he pass on one Dragon X gene to Daenerys and then one to Elena Targaryen. But so it's possible that there was one in there, but we don't really see any dragons hatching at this point. So I think the implication is that she was not that special. Like she's certainly not double X, Rhaenys, Dreamfire, Rhaena, Rhaenyra, Daenerys kind of special. She might have had one Dragon X, but it was not enough to hatch some dragons. Da, da, da. And the dick jokes of Game of Thrones were popular with the greater audience. There's a lot of dick jokes in in the books. I'm trying to think like which has more dick jokes. I mean, obviously, Ice and Fire is bigger material, so there's probably more dick jokes in the books. But there's a lot more of the balls jokes and the eunuch jokes in the show, even though the show is. Did you already say Yara and the escape attempt? Oh, right. I totally forgot. No, that's horrible. The Yara plots of the early Game of Thrones seasons in season 4, it's just, that was dreadful. Oh my Lord. You get so excited that she's gonna go and rescue Theon, and then it's just the biggest letdown ever. Oh, they could have done so much with that, Let's see. Oh right, Locke going north. Like, yeah, what the point? What was the point of that? They essentially had this character. Um, they had this character, and they didn't know what to do with him, and so they just needed to, I don't know, send him north, and then how do you kill him off? Let's like like convincing somebody to join the Night's Watch and then be forgiven later is you gotta have a lot of trust for that. Like it's like Cersei attempts to put it forward to one of the with the Kettle Blacks. She says to the Kettle Black, like, oh, you can join the wall, and then I'll liberate you later. And the idea, and the idea is that one, he's really, really stupid. But two, she's seducing him with sex. He can't resist because Cersei is the most beautiful woman in the world. And so Locke, though, I mean, I mean, how in love with Roose Bolton was he? Like, was Roose Bolton like really that seductive with Locke that he convinces him that he can join the Night's Watch and then be forgiven later? I would never trust that. Like, where are my dragons? Coming right up. Yeah, it's true that the Karth plot was pretty weak in season 2. I mean, they made Karth, interesting visually, but the fact that they just took some dragons and put them in a single room, and she went in and killed the warlocks immediately, and then freaking locked Zaro and Dariah in a vault and let them die of thirst. It's pretty rough. pretty. I mean, I don't know what they were going for with that. Dude, I got a bot. Isn't that weird? Isn't that? I've never seen that before. Do I have mods? Carmine. Yeah, Carmine sometimes comes in. Double X like the spam comments. Um, What were some of the best ideas you couldn't work into the fanfic chapters? Hmm, that's a good question. I mean, I tried to get really like the really the best ones in. Um, uh, so a lot of people did with the Daenerys chapter. A lot of people did have some more details on things that on Daenerys's trip to the like back to Vastoth Rock. There was a lot of um, detail and into that, exploring sort of what the characters uh, Jacko and such were and Mago and were doing. I would have liked to have that in, but because it was I realized, and that's how I kind of set up the outline. And when it came down to like it coming out, I just couldn't fit it in flashback. I wanted to get back to the action at Vastoth Rock. Um, with Hotah, there was a lot of writing that people had about creating disputes between the Lannisters and the and the Martells, and it was good stuff. It just I kind of in the end, like, there was just so much for Hotah that couldn't fit in, um, and I kind of wanted the Lannisters to be reasonably surprised by the Dornish attacking them. There was one kind of thing that I thought was kind of funny, is that somebody wrote a story about how every night that Obara Sand was banging a new dude very loudly, and it would keep everybody up in their tents. And uh, I actually thought that was really funny, but I didn't have it in the end. I thought it was, though I did think it was kind of in her character, like, because they did say that, oh, Obara Sand could master any man, and like this was seeded by George R. R. Martin, like that Obara Sand was the super sexual character, and I thought it might have been even funny if she were banging someone like Sir Timon Crakehall, and then just like didn't care that she would kill him the next day. Like, she's banging him for a week, and then like, yeah, he needs to die. Like, I don't care. Like, it would have shown how cold she was. I thought that was actually a good idea, but there just wasn't enough space and time. Though I did really kind of like the idea that Obara Sand would be having like super noisy sex every night. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Um, Jesus, Forrest. Um, uh, Long time, moved to Taipei. Want to buy you a beer or a bubble team sometime? Sure, if you can find me. The it's a. I mean, my life is mainly with the kids, but yeah, I'm around. I'm around in Taipei. The but it's my life is a boring one with the kid. The the most exciting things about my life right now are things like God. Yesterday, the kid was climbing over the couch, and his toe, just he kicked with his toe at like full force, like right into my eye. And I like, oh, it was I was out. I like squealed and like ran to the bathroom. I was like, ah. Luckily, I was okay, but that's my life right now. But yeah, if I can find some time, um, sure, I can meet up with people in Taipei. The Any thought on Adam of Hull's parentage? Still never was able to square how he's a dragon rider if Corlys is his real dad. Because it's not about his dad. It's about his mom. Like, the idea is that these dragon, like the women of Dragonstone and Driftmark like all have Dragon X genes because they were the Lord's right to the first night was getting practiced on them for generations and generations. The idea is just like the regular population there is probably able to ride dragons. Um, and so it's don't pay attention to the dad. Like I know everybody like one of the fundamental things about that George is trying to say with Ice and Fire is that we have all of this focus on the houses, right? And with that focus on the houses, we naturally like focus on the male lineage. So you say, oh, Krakals, like, oh, the Krakals are all huge. Okay. But then like Merritt Frey or like Little Walder Frey are huge. And you're supposed to go, well, are they huge? But they're Frey. Oh, right. Because we have to pay attention to who their mom is. Their mom was a Krakal. And so there's a lot of this like immediate forgetting about like who the mom is and what that means. Like you start in the story like, oh, the Baratheons, like anybody that's a Baratheon's got to have black hair and it's got to have precedence over everything. But then you're forgetting about all of the women. And this goes for me too. Like when I tell people, oh, my ancestors were Dutch. Well, really, it's like my male lineage ancestors were Dutch. Like we've got all sorts of ancestors from all over, all sorts of people. Like, but they're all forgotten. And so a big message of George R. R. Martin is like, pay attention to the women. They're the forgotten ones, but they're just as important or more important. So the idea that like special genes are coming in from the women secretly is a huge thing. So yeah, it doesn't matter who Adam of Hull's father is. It's an irrelevant issue. It's irrelevant if it's Laenor. Doesn't matter if it's Laenor. Doesn't matter if it's Corlys. Doesn't matter if it's Rando Jack. It's about the mom, and the mom is a Valyrian person on Dragonstone, descended from dragon seeds, and so there's probably thousands of people that can ride dragons on Dragonstone and Driftmark. So it's the same with I think it's even like with Jon Snow. Like everybody's like, it's all about his mom, right? Like his specialness is supposed to come through his mom, or Bran. Everyone's focused on the fact that he's a Stark, but his specialness probably comes from Catelyn or a combination of the two. His red hair certainly comes from Catelyn, so did a traitor drink out of the skull of Mormont? That was pretty terrible. That was the best fighter in Westeros, right? Is it Dirk or Clubfoot Carl, right? Or no, Karl Tanner? Karl Tanner. Yeah, Karl Tanner. So people always have these discussions about like who's the best fighter in Westeros. This is a very common like discussion in forums. Like who do you think is the best fighter? Well, the best fighter is Karl Tanner. Like Karl Tanner like could just destroy everybody. Like he was totally defeating Jon, right? And then he gets stabbed in the back. So we kind of decided like Karl Tanner was the all-time greatest fighter in the entire kingdom, and he shouldn't like he's wasted. Oh no, Carmine, the porno bot. The porno bot is gone. Let's see here. Love your content, Preston. Is it possible that there is a Preston Jacobs and Alt Shift X crossover video sometime in the future? I have no problem with it, and I don't think Swifty would probably have a problem either. It's just scheduling and what would we say, and like what would be important about it. He's got his very fancy videos. And I'm just I'm a little YouTuber by comparison. So it's mainly about him. But I'm up for collaborating with anybody. It doesn't matter. Um, but yeah, I don't. We have nothing planned. We've never had anything planned. But people talk about these collaborations for a while. Like all the time. Like, oh, can you collaborate with I don't know, like can you collaborate with PewDiePie? And be like, well, I mean, I don't wouldn't be against it, but I don't know how to coordinating these sorts of things. You're tall because you're Dutch. I think that's the excuse I use. But obviously, like, I say I'm tall because I'm Dutch, but really it's like my mother was much taller relative to women than my father was relative to men. So I say like, oh, I'm very tall because I'm Dutch, but it's really because I'm falling into the whole like male dominated idea that like my ancestry is Dutch. So like my dad was, and sorry Europeans, because you're not going to know what I'm talking about here. But I'm about 6'5", 3/4", 6'6", pretty tall guy. Yeah, that's 196 centimeters for the Europes. And my mother though, my father though is only 6'3", or was 6'3", but my mother was 5'10". So like for a woman, my mother was very tall. But for a man, my father was pretty tall, but my mother was like very tall for a woman. And so I'm getting a lot of tall genes from my mom. But I usually don't say like, oh, well, my mother's background is like a mixture of like English, Scots, Irish kind of stuff. But like, it's just we're all predisposed to think about our surnames. Preschools. um, How do you plan on addressing Bowen Marsh's master plan at the wall, whether it's in POV from Melisandre or others via telephone-style communication, raven letters from Bran's tree? I mean, I imagine eventually through Melisandre that she would kind of figure things out, or like she would be among characters who would then talk it out and figure it out. I don't think like Bran just seeing it is a little little bit odd, but though now that you mention it, like Sam seeing it and talking about what he can warn Jon about in his letter would be a method. You could probably like have it from three perspectives and piece it together. But yeah, I do think that like now that you mention it, I think Sam at first, but then when a Melisandre chapter happens, like her characters would kind of explain everything. Like there's little things like I do think that the frozen bodies in the ice cells being a diversion with the giant like would be something I would want to put in. Like why was so much time spent on those ice cells and stuff like that, I don't necessarily need to have Sir Patrick like live for very long. But the idea that wasn't Sir Patrick and that was somebody else, that was actually a dead body from the ice cells, and that Sir Patrick gets killed somewhere else, and they're like, oh, I thought that was Sir Patrick. No, this is Sir Patrick. Oh, okay, whatever. Like that kind of stuff, I would want to include those details. But that kind of detail, I wouldn't think that Sam would be thinking about that, but but Melisandre might. So I think it would start with Sam and then go to Melisandre. I mean, Bran could definitely think about it too, but Bran's got a lot a plot to do, right? Like the next time we see Bran, he's got to be gearing up for trying to escape. We've got to get into time travel. Like Bran's stuff is complicated and delicate, because we're gonna, we gotta start time traveling with him, and it's an explaining time travel. Do we really want him like wasting his time like on Jon at the wall in Winterfell and things like that? Maybe. I mean, if Bran's going to be 10,000 words, or there's going to be a lot of Bran chapters, but he's got to start time traveling. Let's see here. What do you think about the show setting up that Ned didn't beat Arthur Dayne but lied about it? Obviously, it never paid off in the show. I mean, I think that was probably a George idea, because it was just a checkbox that didn't go anywhere, right? And I kind of think like anything that's just a checkbox that doesn't go anywhere was something that was in the books that they needed to say, but it just, like, R plus Alec was J didn't even go anywhere, right? Or it didn't go anywhere very much. So you kind of just feel like, oh, they're just doing it because the book had that plot point. So yeah, I mean, Tower of Joy, and I think that that must have been the situation, because it doesn't make sense that Ned would beat Arthur Dayne. I mean, come on. I mean, Arthur Dayne is, the sword of the morning, and Jaime specifically says that he's this incredible fighter. Like, why would Ned be able to defeat him on his own? Of course Ned lied about it, or that there was some sort of like double team or something. So I think that it's probably something from George's notes of what happened. They needed to include it because they were just checking off boxes, and they didn't think about what it meant in the grander scheme of things. Because I think in fact, they went the opposite way, unfortunately, in the show. One of the things, like, I think one of the misreadings of Ned is that he's the super honorable guy. Ned is not always a super honorable guy. Like, the whole idea is that at the end, when push comes to shove, he breaks, right? Like, when push comes to shove and they're like, oh, he's like, oh, I don't value my own life. I'm going to, Stannis is the true king, and I'm not going to lie for you, and things like that. And they're like, oh, really? Because we've got your daughter Sansa. And he's like, fuck, And so he lies at the end, and he goes back on his honor to try to save his daughter's life. And you have, you ask yourself, well, which is better? Like, saving your daughter's life or keeping your honor? Well, clearly saving your daughter's life. And so, it's this great thing to learn that, like, Ned was not perfect, and that he had his mistakes too. And in fact, we already got that too, like him lying to Robert and rewriting the note about putting like the heir instead when Robert had said Joffrey. Like, it was just like he thought he was being clever, but it was also like dishonorable shit. Like, Ned makes his mistakes. He's not perfect. And unfortunately, besides like showing that he lied at the Tower of Joy, which didn't go anywhere, they like made him into this perfect fucking character, which is unfortunate, retroactively, like making it like even Arya like made him into this feminist that, like, no, like, Ned's got his problems, like let him have his problems. He's imperfect. So I would say that what I don't hate that they included that scene. I hate that they included that scene and then they went back on it and made Ned into the most perfect person ever, so Amy's 5'11". That's the and Stephanie is just shy of 5'2". height is a funny. This is getting off topic, but like height is a very funny thing. Being a tall guy, uh, the so most women, not all, but most women want to date a man that's taller than them. And so, as a person who's like 6'6", like when I'd run into women who are like 6'1", you know, like you're the most irresistible person in the world because they're like, oh my gosh, it's a person that's taller than me, and they like go nuts for you, you know. Um, and so on that in that sense, like in my past, I ended up dating a lot of tall women because like they were very very interested in me. Um, but you know, I didn't really care about height so much. In fact, my wife now is five. My wife is like 5'4". She's not incredibly tall. So, um, but it's this weird limiting thing for tall girls, and I think there's a show on Netflix about it. But you know, feeling awkward as a tall man at 6'6", and you know, some people are like, "Oh, isn't it great to be that tall?" I'm like, I'm a little too tall for a man. I think like you know, optimally men like to be like 6'3". You know, 6'6" is a little tall. Um, and so you know, I was always a little insecure about being too tall. Because I'm not even tall enough to be like useful for basketball. the, but so but I can only imagine like I can only imagine that it's just so much worse for tall women. Like tall women just have a really tough time because there's just so few people to choose from out there. If you have this, you know, premise of like I need to be with someone taller. Or they like to say it's actually even worse than that because I think most women say I want a guy that's taller than me in heels, which is which is even which makes it even worse. Like you know, um, like poor like you know poor Amy. You put her in heels. You know she's 6'1". Like percentage of the male population that's above 6'1" is like I mean you're down to like what 5%. You know it starts. Yeah. Oh, but Sprinkles and Wrinkles writes that I'm very tall and my husband's short, so the kids will be average. That's yeah. I mean, I think my son is still pretty tall. I think he's. I mean, it's hard to tell because he's like 2.5, but he's like 80th percentile right now, which I think is going to be a pretty good height for him. You know, but the but you know the women that don't mind shorter men, I think that's great. It's great outside the box thinking, you know, because you get to choose from a lot of a lot more people. And there's of course like all these Napoleon guys that are like super short that like want to have the Amazonian women. You see those guys a lot, but the like they're like it's like a 5'5" guy, and he's like I only like women that are over 6 feet tall, and you're like okay, uh, but it's funny. Um, my mom was 5'11", my pop was 5'5". Another um, mismatch or so I wound up normal size. Yeah, I mean that definitely happens. The you kind of though it's height tends I think to average out. Though there are definitely people where something happens. Like my my sister's mother-in-law is like incredibly short, and even though her husband isn't is pretty tall, like all and she's pretty tall, like her kids my nephews, you know, maybe have some short genes. They're on the short side. And it's like, huh, you know, clearly got it from that grandmother. Um, why are you trying to, and this all gets to like Mendelian genetics, I guess. Why are you trying to inject Mendelian genetics into A Song of Ice and Fire? This is how George R. R. Martin thinks. He actually thinks a little more simplistically than Mendelian genetics, but he's definitely thinking this way. And certain things, like especially how he views like uh, dominant and recessive genes, his inclusion of albinos, things that do actually work, on a Mendelian fashion. Mendelian genetics is actually kind of a rare thing to see in the real world because genetics is so complicated that um, it's tough to actually like figure it all out. Like my mother has brown eyes, my father had blue eyes, and I have green eyes. And my brother has hazel eyes, and my sister has brown eyes. And you know, it doesn't really like simple Punnett squares Mendelian genetics does not explain that. But uh, you don't you don't have that nice and fire like a nice and fire like everything's so cut and dry. Like people either take after their mother or they take after their father, or there's some sort of like incest with recessive genes. So it's like I'm not trying to inject it. Like it's definitely there. Like George R. R. Martin is definitely thinking about the world in a Mendelian genetic fashion. And he was big into thinking about genetics in his sci-fi writing. In fact, I'm almost surprised that like Mendelian genetics, it being so simple, is what he goes with, because he should know that genetics is much more complicated, than that. Okay, I'm gonna push ahead just because we've got guys in heels based. It used to be that heels were for men. Um, and then it somehow became only, yeah, Tom Cruise. Somehow only became a woman thing, but it used to be that men all wore heels. Um, I actually don't like. I actually kind of always hated the fact that like shoes had so much cushion and so much heel to them. I was always looking for shoes that were just kind of like very flat and thin to make me just a little bit shorter. Um, but I don't think like being tall, like there's advantages, but you also do get just a lot of back pain and stuff. So um, that's true. It's unironically expensive to be big too. Eat a lot, drink a lot, expensive. Get hot chicks, obviously. I mean, everything's sometimes like it all depends. Like, it all depends what you find hot, right? Like, like I admit, like, if you're into tall blondes, uh, being tall is an advantage. But say you are attracted to, um, you know, 5 foot, you know, dark people. Like you're not necessarily set up in the in the best position. But it all depends. But it is more expensive. You obviously have to eat more food and drink more and stuff like that. But I think tall people generally earn more eventually. So, and they probably earn more than what they consume. I'm guessing. I think there's been studies about like height and income, so I think it all works out. Tall clothes cost more. It's true if you go to a big and tall store. Big and tall stores are incredibly expensive. Generally speaking, tall clothes are the same price, but it's really hard to find your size. So, like, really, my size is an XL long. Um, I can't find that, so most of my shirts just hang low. Uh, and I think it's just because like they don't make that many, and when tall people find them, they buy them. And so you just like I can't find my jean size ever, and when I do, it's like I immediately get it, and I'm just like there must be like a whole bunch of guys that have my jean size, and then just like when they see them, they're just like, oh, they got them, and then there's none left or something. Um, uh, Putin wears lifts in his shoes. Yeah, there's a lot of really insecure short men. I mean, I'm an insecure tall man, but like, there's a lot of insecure like really, really insecure short men and like what it does. Um, um, let's see here. Last I checked, rich people countries are on average taller historically because they eat properly. Um, proper is the I get what you say, what you're saying, or at least have more nutrition and caloric content. I get what you're saying. The so there is a general um, pattern where if that people in northern latitudes do tend to be taller than people in southern latitudes. There are some exceptions, like there's random places in Africa where you've got these like super tall people, like in Sudan and stuff, and um, but generally speaking, you go across the board. You look at the taller countries. You've got Scandinavia, super tall. You've got Russia, very tall people. You've got the Koreans and the North Chinese, who are pretty tall. And then as you head south, people start getting shorter. Like, the Vietnamese are considered very short. Latin Americans are very short. And so, generally speaking, this is the case. Now, there's the question of like, oh, well, how much is nutrition and how much is genetics? Because also, people at northern latitudes, those countries are more developed than countries at southern latitudes. And the reason that a lot of people have given historically for why the North kind of defeated the equatorial nations, there's a theory that it had to do with surplus. That if you come from a latitude that has a winter, you're forced into the process of producing excess for winter. And so if you're in that like mindset of always like producing more than you need, because you need to produce more than you need to make it through winter, that you're always in this mindset of excess, that you're gonna defeat someone that's in a mindset of hand to mouth. Now, even with all of that, like I think even if you gave a Vietnamese the whole country of Vietnam like perfect nutrition with like everything that they eat in the Netherlands, like milk and dairy and bread and all those things, yeah, they'll probably end up being like taller. The next generation will be taller. Like we've seen this with Japan. Like we've seen like the height in Japan just like skyrocket over the course of 2 generations. But they're still not getting up to like the northern latitude people. Like they're still like, you might get Japanese people that are like 5'10", 6 feet, but you're not getting them at like 6'6" and stuff. Like you're not getting like, Scandinavia, Netherlands kind of stuff. But yeah, so obviously diet is a big issue, but my feet are 13. Finding shoes is tough, as some might say. Yeah, it's funny here in Taiwan. I can't even. I have pretty small feet for my height. I wear 12 wides, but like I can't find it. It's impossible to find a 12 in this country. So it's amazing. Um, let's see. I saw something here. Real quick, I saw this thing on Gendry's mother. Read an article about Cersei being Gendry's mother. Thoughts? Certainly not in the book. There's a theory that because in the show she had in the show they add a scene with Cersei talking to Catelyn in season 1 about how she had an extra child that had black hair and then it died, and that she remembered this like um, she thought a lot about like having this child die, and it was this connection moment between Cersei and Catelyn, who was dealing with Bran dying. Um, it was very well acted. It was a scene I did not mind actually, just because I mean you can give anything to Lena Headey and she's gonna spin it into something great, right? Um, but it didn't really make sense to the plot later because they introduced Maggie the Frog and they're like, how many children are you gonna have? And they're like, oh, you're gonna have 3. And it's like, well, no, she had 4 kids and then 5 by the end, and or was gonna have 5 at the end. So it didn't make any sense, but she definitely couldn't get away with it in the book. But the idea that somehow she let this baby die but not die, and it was really Gendry. I mean, the problem is they didn't put thought into Cersei and that kid ever. The fact that they made the mistake later and just forgot about it means that like they were not thinking about that baby at all. They wrote one scene, never thought about it, So it's just so in that sense, I don't think it means anything. I think some people are just like, well, maybe Cersei was lying. Yeah, it's a possibility because it just doesn't make. But I don't know why she's trying to connect with Catelyn. Yeah, so modern diets have made Asians grow like weeds, dem hormones. There is a question about how much hormones actually end up in the meat. And I do wonder about this as well, because steroids dissipate really fast. In fact, I've never been on a steroid, or not. I mean, I've used topical steroids, but like I've never used like the pill steroids. But when you take them, they're apparently like candy in the sense that you suck on them, because you can't just like take a pill, because then you'll just have this like skyrocket of hormone, and then your body compensates and gets it out of the system. So you kind of have to have continuous exposure to the hormone in order to have it have any effect on your body. So like steroid pills are actually sucked on like candy for like continuous long exposure to the steroid. And the hormones that you give to animals, they actually are like tagged on to their ears so that there is long exposure to the steroid over time. And so there's this question of, okay, there's no evidence right now that like the steroid that you're giving the animal actually ends up in the meat. But even if it were to end up in the meat, would it really make that much of a difference, considering that like it would just be like this tiny little spike and it wouldn't be continuous exposure? And I don't know. I mean, I'm not a big scientist. That's just kind of what I've heard, that there's like a big question, like, well, can we really prove that giving hormones to animals leads to hormone changes in the people that eat the meat? And I don't know. I mean, I've definitely heard things both ways, and I'm no scientist, but I think it's something worth questioning. I think we all kind of default to this idea that like, oh, a hormone-filled cow is going to lead to a hormone-filled person, but I don't necessarily think that's true. It might be, but I think we need some more research on it. Which Song of Ice and Fire character do you identify with most, and why? If you say Hot Pie or Sam, take a shot. No, I don't really identify with Sam at all. Just because like I don't have that, even though I might have that degree of insecurity, I don't have that degree of cravenness. Like, I may be an awkward person, but I'm also like pretty bold. And so like, even when I was young, like I would do things that were stupid and say things that were stupid at the wrong time. But I was always kind of maybe overly courageous. I probably needed a little more fear. So I don't identify with Sam at all, even though Sam is essentially George R. R. Martin. Like that's George R. R. Martin's character. I always say I identify with Sweet Robin the most, just because he's just funny and crazy. But maybe as he's just who I sympathize with. I don't know if I identify with him. Who do I really identify with? maybe Theon. Like Theon has some like dark thoughts in his head, and he's kind of, he's like simultaneously arrogant and insecure and things like that. I think maybe I identify with Theon the most. Uh, he wants to prove himself, and he's always like feeling like he's not proving himself and things like that. Um, yeah, I think I would go with that answer. Um, but saw something that uh, I'm not sure what HBD stands for, but gotta but so if you could write that out, I'll answer that question. The Dutch actually shrank for a generation. Well, yeah. Um, oh, I missed a super chat about the eighth A Song of Ice and Fire novel. Is there going to be an eighth? What would you name the inevitably necessary eighth A Song of Ice novel other than A Time for Wolves, either coming before or after A Dream of Spring? Oh, that's a that's a it's a good question. I mean, obviously, you'd want the last one to be A Dream for Spring, and then we have The Winds of Winter now. So, what would you fit? What would be between um the in that? I don't know. I'd have to come up with that. C Daro C8. I'd have to think about that for something a little more poetic. I actually think A Feast for Crows is the best title of all of the books. I would say that I mean, I think A Game of Thrones is a good title, and then I think the rest of them are kind of lazy, right? right, right. Like A Game of Thrones, it is clever enough because you're talking about like turning the the monarchy into some sort of game of chess, and so it's going to be a Game of Thrones. Okay, I get it. And thematically, that's it. And then you're just kind of going with like with A Clash of Kings, A Storm of Swords, and A Dance with Dragons. You're just creating a random alliteration, like that anyone could do. Like coming up with A Clash of Kings or A Storm of Swords, like that's something you can come up with in like 60 seconds. I mean, um, it's so A Feast for Crows though is more interesting, right? Like that's poetic and um, just the image of like thematically of like these of feast, like not caring about the future and just like feasting off of the dead bodies of others, and that's all you're going to worry about. Like that's some good stuff. And then I don't know, Dream of Spring. It's just very George R. R. Martin to throw in song and dream to try to make things beautiful. Like he does this a lot. Like just, oh, I'm going to make it beautiful by calling this a song. I'm going to call this beautiful by calling this a dream. Because we can't think about song and dream without thinking beautiful. So he's just going to, it's just A Dream of Spring. Okay, well, that's fine enough. But I don't think it's as interesting and poetic as A Feast for Crows or a Game of Thrones. So I mean, let's see. I mean, let's let me think of like some sort of like alliteration that would be as like basic as Clash of Kings or Storm of Swords or Dance of Dragons. Like you could be like, oh, the blood of battle. You're like, okay, like the blood of battle is going to be my book. Oh, okay. Um, but yeah, just lazy names. Storm of Swords. Come on. Uh, I identify with the peasant in A Feast for Crows who describes auburn hair as brownie black. Honestly, that line gets me every time. Huh. Let me look at. Oh, brownie red. So in Brienne 1, um, she talks to the hedge knight. I think this is Sir Elifer the Penniless. She says, the nearsighted hedge knight scratched his head. I recall no such maid. What sort of hair is Auburn? Brownie red, said the older man. No, we saw her not. We saw her not, milady, the younger told her. Come dismount. The fish is almost done. Are you hungry? Brownie red. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess Auburn is brownie red. I kind of always think it as rusty. When I was young, um, there was this character called Rusty Jones, um, and for some reason, this character was involved in like the coating of like rust proofing warranty coats for cars. And I think my parents had this old Chevy station wagon, and there was a sticker in the back seat on the window that had Rusty Jones on it. And I think for some reason this was my first my first exposure to like Auburn, like the idea of somebody having rust colored hair. That Rusty Jones would be like, it's not red, but it's almost red. It's like, it's the Rusty Brown, Rusty Jones. Eighth book, A Nice Nightmare. A gift for Christmas. Oh, HBD stands for Human Biodiversity. Human biodiversity. Is there a theory with this? Let's see here. Oh gosh, this is pretty dark. Oh god. Oh my lord. Okay. So an ideological successor to eugenics, human biodiversity, like eugenics, is primarily use of euphemism. Ostensibly, human biodiversity refers to the scientifically proven and therefore apolitical genetic differences between groups of humans. The terms fuse biological and liberal language into benign-sounding neologism like neurodiversity. It's pseudoscientific racism. It appropriates the scientific authority by posing that as an empirical rational discourse that essentially that there needs to be this idea that there needs to be some sort of like genetic diversity in the world and that we shouldn't all like blend together. Is this I imagine that this is where they're going with it. Modern field of genetics have disavowed any theories of human behavior. Jeez. Okay. Yeah. So I have one. So, gosh. All right. So spicy politics. So right now, and this has been going for a while in America. Uh, there's this, and so when I was young, I did hear about these like um, uh, human biodiversity arguments from like Nazis that oh, if you look at, they would use like hummingbirds as an example, like, oh well, all these hummingbirds, like they have all these different like subspecies of hummingbirds, and they kind of know not to interbreed with each other, and that creates biodiversity, and biodiversity is like good, um and so and then they kind of argued that like they made this leap that, oh, if humans started like interbreeding, that somehow that would lead to the downfall of the species, which, how that leap is made isn't really explained, but somehow like the mixing of people would somehow lead to the fall of humanity. Um, so that's on this like weird genetic level that these racists would have. Now, today we also have this great replacement theory going on, which um, I know that it's like very hip in the news right now, but this has been something that's been going on for a long time. Like Steve Bannon was really huge into it. He had this book that he used to always talk about in interviews, about immigrants arriving at the shores of France or something, and like overtaking a society because there's just so many of them and stuff like this. And they kind of all go together, right? This idea that, oh, we have this way of life, and it's being threatened by all of these others coming in, right? Anyway, I completely think like it's hogwash. Like if anything, humanity should probably do the reverse. Like I'm married to somebody that's not white, and it's interesting like going into the doctor when you're having a baby with somebody that's not white, because they'll before, like a big part of having a kid is that you have a lot of genetic screening kind of stuff, and you worry, it's a big worry part of like of pregnancy. Like, is my kid going to be normal? Is my kid going to be healthy? Is he going to have, like, they spend a lot of time on ultrasounds, like counting the fingers, counting the toes. And you spend a lot of time like worrying about this, and like how many genetic tests do you want? Do you want like the most expensive genetic test? Do you want the budget genetic test? You're required to get this genetic test at minimum, but you can spend this and this amount of money for these genetic tests, and it's, but what's also really funny is when you go in with somebody that's not white, when you have two different people from two different races, they kind of go, you don't have to worry about it. Like you're fine. Like the chances of you like having getting double recessive genes like for something horrible is like so much lower because you are of two different races. And you're like, oh, okay. They're like, like, so it's like, it's kind of this huge like relief off of your shoulders. Like, oh, thank goodness, it's a big part of having a kid, like the worry about this. And they set it up because like it's something you normally wouldn't worry about, but because you have like an appointment and they're like, well, we got to do genetic testing this time. Oh crap. Should I be like worrying about like genetics, like the genetics of my kid? Like, but this idea that somehow, so from my perspective, like, or the perspective that I've seen in my life, like, and my children, like, it seems like it's super healthy to, have a kid with somebody from a different race. Like, that's what all the science and doctors have told me. I've generally, I've generally been attracted to people that have been, other than white people in my life. I guess, like, it doesn't, if somebody told me like, no, you need to breed with a white person in order to protect either your culture or like biodiversity, I just wouldn't buy it. I would have to see like some weird science to it. But it's also just like, it's so insincere, isn't it? That because it's these same people that are pushing this idea of like human biodiversity that also like don't care about animal biodiversity and don't care about environmentalism and like don't care about science. Like they care nothing about these other things, but they're going to choose this like one little pseudoscience thing. Hello. How are you?
Yo, this is not spicy enough. We need some more spiciness here. What? Oh, by the way, real quick, what
Yeah.
you were just off the back of what you were talking about, you don't remember all the weirdo leftists who were raging against you around the time of season 8, season 7, because you were marrying an Asian woman and they thought that you were fetishizing your wife for some reason, and that you should not marry an Asian woman, that you should be with a white woman. You don't remember those people, do you?
I mean, I imagine those people exist. I think they're fucked up. Like,
No, they were
yeah,
in like your live stream. Remember we were doing with Phil
yeah,
the Issues guy, and I banned a couple of them. But these were like weirdo leftists who were accusing you of fetishizing your Asian wife, and
yeah. I mean, there's some weirdo. I mean, you can take certain ideas and go really really far with them. Like I in grad school, I had there was a professor. I didn't have him, but there was a professor who was super into protecting minority communities, and he was into protecting them so much that he believed that like that the white communities like economics and education system and everything was whitewashing them, and that the only solution was for them to have their own education system and own economic systems. And it's like, yeah, but you're talking, that's segregation. Like it's like segregation for I understand that your like heart is in the right place, that you want to protect these people, but that's segregation. Like you're taking it too far.
that sounds like Professor Flowers talk.
Yeah, it's true. It's exactly like Carmen and I were actually talking about this week. We're talking about Vosh and Professor Flowers. If anybody had seen that long discussion, and basically both Carmen and I kind of agree with Vosh and thought Professor Flowers was a bit crazy, but the Professor Flowers
And a racist. She does not like white people, which
she does
just go
not.
and say it.
She does not. It's yeah. So for those that need a background, like Vosh is this very very left wing streamer, very very left wing, very very socialist, and Professor Flowers is very left wing as well. But she's so left wing that she believes that all land needs to be given back to the original indigenous people that lived upon it, and that they had the absolute right to choose what race of people lived there. And so the idea being like America would be given back to the American Indians, and then they could decide what to do. Or specifically, she thought that South Africa should be given back to black people, and they should be able to decide what to do with their oppressors, with their former oppressors. She didn't understand that South Africa's first people weren't actually black or white, but that's beside the point. But and that you'd be giving the land back to a completely different group, but she was bonkers, because in practice what you're talking about like is Glidus makes the best point. The leftist infighting. Who would have thunk? Yes, this is a huge problem with the left. The biggest problem. But but when you're talking about like in practice, what that would mean, like say you gave a country back to any race and they could determine what races could stay there or not. I mean, this is ethnically cleansing, and the problem Vosh had with it was he knew it was ethnic cleansing. But in practice, you're talking like there are millions and millions of people that are in interracial relationships, and millions of children that are the children of interracial relationships. And if you're talking about expelling all of an oppressor class, you're talking about literally breaking up families. Like it's so like offensive to think like, wait, you want to rip a family apart? You want to like send the mother or father to a different country, um, and expel them? Like, it's in practice the dumbest thing. Or even when I'm talking about this prof I had in grad school, like when he's talking about like protecting the black community, like there's millions of white people that are married to black people. Like there is no like set line of the black community and white community. Like we blend together. Like there's always been a blending. Like you can't like unblend us. Like we're like white people and black people in America are like forever entwined and can never be undone. It can never be undone. And probably for the better, you know? Like so it's just it's really I find any discussion of like great replacement or trying to preserve culture or you shouldn't blend with this person incredibly stupid and disingenuous. Like these lines are artificial. They're imagined. And people have been breaking these lines and going across them like forever. And people like have made lives and love each other across these lines and have produced children across these lines. So when people tell like make statements like I shouldn't love who I want to love, or I shouldn't have a family with who I want to have a family with, like that's just disgusting to me. Like which is why like I will always fight for, you know, like same-sex marriage and interracial marriage and all of these sorts of things. Like you love who you love, and like these are families. Like you're like you can't theoretically being like, oh well, that family shouldn't exist, let's break them apart. Like fuck you. Like oh god. But this goes way back. Like even in college, like I had friends that, you know, a Jewish person who decided that, you know, they only wanted to date Jewish people because they really want to have Jewish kids. And you're just like, fuck off. Like it's life's too short. Like love who you're going to love. Like these are artificial creations. Like they're imaginary. Like they're completely, utterly imaginary. Like you just invented them and then you're going to follow them. Like, ugh. It's horrible. It's horrible.
By the way, real quick, find that guy that asked you that question. What's his name? Coome. Find him real quick and click on his name.
Coom.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there he is.
yeah.
That click on his name real quick. I don't know if that's his real picture, but
Probably not. That's
to be a dick, but he kind of looks like you if you voted for Trump. No offense.
Like I'd lose all of my hair and go nuts.
Yeah,
No, obviously I don't think.
Started voting for Trump and watching Tucker Carlson.
But it is the other thing. Like, aren't organ bone marrow transplants harder to find for mixed race people? Well, if you had more mixed race people, I mean, I don't know, but I imagine if you had more mixed race people, it wouldn't be a problem. Like, there's so many like millions of people. Like one thing, like this whole like preserving of diversity. Like, there's fucking 8 billion people on Earth. You're gonna be fine. Like, marry who you fucking want. There's gonna be white people, okay? Like, you're not gonna run out of white people, okay? Same with black people, same with Asian people. Like, marry who you fucking want. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, there's so many of us. There's so many. Like, you know, it's like, oh my gosh. Like, if I go to the grocery store, should I buy a Twinkie? Because if I eat that Twinkie, like, I'm taking away from the Twinkie supply. There's fucking more Twinkies, and they can make more Twinkies. There's just so many. Like, there's so many fucking people. There's so many. Like it's not even like an issue. Like, oh gosh, we got to worry about like biodiversity of humans. No, we don't. Like, there's so many different types of people, and that's great. It's wonderful. It's wonderful that there's so many different types of people. And there's no way that like these people that are like, oh, my way of life is being taken over. Like, how? What? I think it's especially funny from I find it especially funny I think it's especially funny when people talk like Americans talk like fear of their culture being like like taken over it. Like you're an American. Like your culture is dominating. Like you're taking over everything else, and you're like, oh no, like my culture is dying off. How? Like you know, like everything American is everywhere. I could go anywhere in the world and find my American stuff and find Americans and you know this is it's not like I'm like from Burundi or something, you know, like like even then there's millions of Burundians. Eating Twinkies, now it's sex talk. I guess so, man. Um the Preston, do you know the YouTuber ContraPoints? I've heard of ContraPoints. Isn't ContraPoints the trans streamer who, and I think ContraPoints may have had a shift from being liberal to conservative, maybe? I don't know. But American culture is cultural appropriation. Well, first of all, no one talks about cultural appropriation anymore. That was like a 2015 term. Okay, I think society has moved past cultural appropriation because cultural appropriation is life, right? Like everybody culturally appropriates. Like everything came from somewhere else. It's really quite silly. In here in Taiwan, they have like curry, but it's not really curry like curry from India. It's curry from Japan. But curry from Japan, like Japanese curry, isn't really from Japan. It's from England, which took its curry from India. So you're talking like an Indian, like the English interpretation of curry, and then the Japanese interpretation of English interpretation of curry. And then we have a Taiwanese interpretation of a Japanese interpretation of an English interpretation of an Indian curry. Like it's like life is just appropriation. Like it's just I mean, and all cultures are all appropriated. There's nothing genuine about any of this. My sister is a PhD anthropologist, and she did a long research on belly dancing. Belly dancing in the Middle East is really quite interesting because, like, we think of belly dancing as being this very, very Middle Eastern thing, and it's taken hold mostly in Lebanon. I would say people would now say is the kind of the cultural heart of belly dancing, though internationally there's more belly dancing than in the Middle East now. But nonetheless, it turns out belly dancing wasn't invented in Lebanon. It was invented kind of in Egypt, but it was only invented after these tourists had come to Egypt and they saw some tumblers, and they were described as tumblers. And it was probably just one random family that had like a bunch of tumblers in their family. Like they went and they were this random town in Egypt, and this family was gymnastic, and they were jumping around and they're rolling around. And this guy came back to England and was like, oh my gosh, when you go to Egypt, you've got to see like the dancing. And so this next round of tourists from England arrive in Egypt, and they're like, where's the dancing? And all the Egyptians are like, what the fuck are these foreigners talking about? Like, but they want to see dancing. Okay, fuck, what do we do? And so for the foreigners, the Egyptians invented this tourism like show of belly dancing. And then it kind of took off. And so like, it's weird because like, if it weren't for the tourists coming in and otherizing the Egyptians and looking for something exotic, there wouldn't have been belly dancing. But belly dancing is now this like very Middle Eastern thing, and now it's a very international thing, and it's this really weird history, you know. Or Nando's Peri Peri is a story I like as well, because like in America there's this chicken restaurant from it calls itself South African chicken, and if you're in South Africa, these peri peri chickens restaurants are pretty common. And so peri peri chicken is this hot spiced like chicken, but the peri peri pepper comes from Carmine's home of Brazil. And the
Gross.
Portuguese, because they had both Mozambique and Brazil, brought the pepper from from Brazil to Mozambique. And then because the family that started Nando's was exiled into Mozambique because of conflicts in South Africa, they took the Mozambique pepper, peri peri, and brought it back to South Africa and started this peri peri chicken restaurant, which now has made its way to America. So when you eat this American fast food South African chicken, it's really a Mozambique chicken, but it's really a pepper from Brazil. So it's just like fucking all over the place. Like it's just, and that's just life. Like
so they're all really culturally appropriating me. I do not give you guys permission to use this. I do not. You're all racist.
Next time you go, well, they don't have fucking Nando's in Kansas, do they? But they had them in Jersey, I'm sure. Carmine, you've never had it, yeah? Or you?
No, it's not that. It's just.
Oh yeah. You fucking like love it when I call you out on being in Kansas.
this fucking guy every time. Oh my god! Never tell a government agent anything because they always blab it. They always blab it.
I've talked about you being in Kansas for.
I know. Kansas sucks. Never come here.
Yeah, but life is about blending, and life is about like appropriating, and life is about like adapting and mixing and all of these wonderful things. And so it's it's fun, and I would like anybody that's like, oh, you ought not to, like, first of all, if anybody tells you like, except for like literally having sex with animals or children, like, fuck who you want to fuck. Like, honestly, like, fuck who you want to fuck. Like, it's the greatest joy in life. This is why, like, this all comes back to this, and like people thinking that they can ban abortion and not have people trying to regulate like who they fuck. Like, this is all people want to regulate, like who you want to fuck. Just honestly, like whoever you want to fuck, because oh my gosh, that is the best joy in life. It's like being like, oh, today I'm really hungry for pizza. You know what you should do? Eat some pizza. Like it's as simple as that. Like, what do you crave? Go do it. Carpe diem. Seize the day. Like, yeah, I mean, okay. No incest. Okay. No incest. No twincest. Okay. You can add that to the list. Okay.
Careful, Preston. You're gonna lose all your Alabama subscribers.
I know. But Karl brings up a big point that many genetic diseases are endemic to certain select populations. It's true that like there's certain like in the Black community, sickle cell anemia, or there's something in the Jewish community. But like, if you want healthy kids, fuck somebody from far away. Like, Egret's advice is the way to go. Why shouldn't you fuck animals? This is a
yeah. What is happening here?
I know, man. This was actually a discussion a ways back, right? Because like I think like what Shoe on Head and who's that nerdy guy who does movie reviews, who's kind of left wing, Big Joel. They were all talking about this as well. Like, why do we morally not fuck animals? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if animals are really like into it. I mean, if the animals probably don't care. I don't know. I don't really have a problem with people fucking animals. If you really want to fuck, if the animal is into it, like, go for it. I don't fucking care. Like, it's not It's
What
not
have
something
you
I really
done?
care about.
Why did you just? What have you done?
I mean, but like it just doesn't matter. Like, I don't know. I mean, Glidus is like, oh fuck, Preston. Like, if you're not, see, my whole thing is like, if you're not hurting anybody, like having sex with a child hurts them, you know, and having sex with like a family member like produces like genetically malformed offspring, right? So like, there's harm. Um, I think if you're torturing an animal and the animal is not into it, like whatever, but you know, it's like I'm just gonna get clipped. But you know, who cares? Like, who cares? I don't know. And that's the thing is how does a sheep consent? I don't know. But we're really talking about like the problem is like I'm a utilitarian, so I immediately go to like who is being harmed? Is there harm? If the animal is uncomfortable, then yeah, probably, you know. But morally speaking, I can't come up with a reason if the animal is consenting. Um, um, Condoms exist. Is incest with condoms cool, Preston? Well, condoms can fail, right? You know. Um, yeah, but so, but I don't think. So I know that in certain states, you can marry your cousin if you're past the age of like having kids. Um, but but there might be some like disease reasons or something, you know. I don't know, but I'm not gonna, you know, like, but more, you know, you have to ask yourself the same question, like, what's the like who is being harmed, you know? Jake Cruz is like, what did I walk into? Well, what we're really talking about is like breaking down like each of us is kind of imperfect. Like even though I'm a utilitarian, and many of us are utilitarians basically. Like society has still put in us um, things that are dogmatically creepy. You know, like that we don't want to do. Like maybe people out there like don't walk under ladders, right? Um, or you know you don't want to break a mirror. Like we all know that there's nothing fucking happens if you break a mirror. Nothing happens if we walk under a ladder, right? But we still kind of don't do it, right? There's still something kind of off and superstitious about it. Um, but if we really had to like outline and describe our moral system, you know, like don't cause harm to others, don't cause suffering. Like if you really had to do that, and then somebody brings out some sort of superstition or something that's really creepy, like incest or you know bestiality, it's difficult to explain because we're imperfect human beings, and that and occasionally we believe random dogmatic stuff for no reason, and so that you know this is the trying to poke a hole in utilitarianism by poking a hole in the imperfectness of a single individual, right? So like, um, so that's all it is. So like you know you can sit there and laugh and be like haha Preston thinks you know thinks it's okay to have sex with animals, and it's like nah, not really. Like obviously I'm an imperfect human being and that seems really creepy, and I don't think one should probably do that. But if I really had to list out like the moral reasons on why it's wrong, I probably couldn't do it. Oh, look, another Tinder date. um, so it's yeah, I dogmatically jump into my bed because I fear the monsters below. We all get kind of nervous and stuff. You know, they're imperfect fears that we have and imperfect um, beliefs that we have. And keep in mind that like this is how like when I was young, like um, and I was creeped out by homosexuality when I was young, and many people are still creeped out by homosexuality. Um, it's based on nothing, and like after examining my brain and my moral code and everything, you know, I came to the conclusion that no, there's nothing wrong with homosexuality, It it's just that being raised in a world where it was considered wrong and creepy, like got into my subconscious mind. And that's probably the case with bestiality or something like that. So if it's not really like, I can't really describe like why it's morally wrong, because it's probably not morally wrong. It's just we don't do it because it's a superstition, creepy thing in our society. Yeah. Right. It's not morally wrong. It's just gross. Thank you for concisely just like putting in like what I like. But that's the thing, is we have this like feeling that certain things are gross. I once, I used to live with some hippie dudes, and in a very, very hippie part of DC. And one of the guys he only ate organic foods. And his reason for eating organic foods was he was against genetically modified food. And I sort of, I challenged him on this, and I was like, well, what's wrong with genetically modified food? And he's like, oh my God, it's just like creepy. You're like messing with the DNA. And it's like, your whole justification for not eating something is ew. Like, which is the same justification for, being against gay sex, right? Is ew, right? Like, there's nothing really like concrete. Like, once you actually examine it, there's nothing concrete. So, would people get sick? But again, it's like, it's one of those things that's like, ew, but if you actually examine it, can animals consent? I suppose you could make this kind of like a practical situation and be like, oh, well, they could probably non-verbally consent, but, and this is true. Like on the genetic engineering, like we've been messing with the DNA for thousands of years. There's nothing like morally different. It's just the idea of like doing it in the lab versus like a farmer in the field, like cross-pollinating something, like creeped him out. And so, so yeah, but that's what it's really about. It's just really about like, we're imperfect. We like to believe that we have consistent moral codes, but we don't. Our moral codes are from all over the map, Isn't the inherent flaw in utilitarianism acceptance of initial value from inherent prejudices? I think the flaw is, I mean, I've heard a lot of flaws, but a lot of them come down to, what's the word I'm looking for? Shit. You haven't accepted, like with anything logical, you need to have an accepted starting point. And everybody kind of like points out that, well, wait, that accepted starting point kind of comes from nowhere. And you just like picked it out of random. And it's like true. So like utilitarianism like begins, for example, with the idea that like human suffering is a bad thing and that human like enrichment is a good thing. Well, that comes from fucking nowhere. Like, why should we care if people suffer? Like, why would you start with that? But we do start with it. So, I mean, we all have these like initial values, and yeah, and that we're basing utilitarianism on. Utilitarianism itself is based on an assumption, but this people get into something what they call the Munchausian trilemma, that everything in life is derived from three places. You either derive it from something else, which is derived from something else, which is derived from something else, which goes on into infinity until you go back to the other two, or it's based on an assumption, which comes from nowhere, or it's based on circular reasoning. So like nothing we know is actually based on anything, because there's like, you can always keep going back until there's no like sound base to where it is. It's just how far you go back, like these anti-abortionists that came on here. It's like they start with the belief that like that a fetus or a zygote or an embryo is a life. Well, if you start with that assumption, like of course you're going to get to the point where like immediately that it's murder. Like you started with the position that it's a life. Like in the most like the most basic weird assumption that was begged from your conclusion. People want to say that Cheez-Its are gross because it's processed, but then they eat a Walmart banana. Yeah, it's true. I was doing some reading about Beyond Burgers. And Beyond Burgers are kind of like up my alley. Like they're definitely like marketed to people like me, in that I kind of understand vaguely that eating meat is wrong, right? Like I understand that it like causes some degree of suffering in animals, and it's the environmental impact of higher order organisms is greater than than eating plants. Like I get that. And so, like, the problem is, I really fucking love meat. Like, I love it. Like, like it's, and so I selfishly like continue to eat meat, even though I kind of know vaguely that it's morally wrong. Like, I just keep participating in this practice. And so I was reading about Beyond Burgers, because Beyond Burgers are like, well, if we can get to the point where it just tastes like meat and is essentially meat, but it's plant, like, wouldn't you eat that? And I was like, yeah, I suppose I would. If you get to a point where it's like comparable in cost and comparable in taste, like I will gladly switch to some sort of gluten-free, like soy-free meat product. But then I was also hearing that like, oh no, Beyond Burger is actually considered a hyper processed food. Like it's had like so many degrees of processing to get to it, to get it to this point. And people are like, oh, you shouldn't have like, you shouldn't have that much processing. You shouldn't eat processed foods. Sorry, I have low iron and need medium rare steak. It's true. I mean, so Beyond Burger is working on getting heme and iron content into their products. And so this is the big aspect to it, is whether they can get that iron content high enough. Because the thing people really crave about steak is the hemoglobin, the heme. And they mainly derive it from beets and stuff like that. And they try to get that taste. But you're right that it's all about trying to get the iron content up. Again, if the meat is nutritionally equivalent, I'd gladly switch as well. Some people are upset about casting characters of House of the Dragon to play by black actors. Why are right-wingers so easily triggered, and why are they never why they never called out being so sensitive? I mean, I do see some left-wingers doing it, because like, for instance, for a long time, right-wingers would use the term snowflake, and then they're like the biggest snowflakes. It's this weird situation where, and Carmine is guilty of this too, until I've like convinced him otherwise, that
Nani?
Yeah. Like, I'm talking about like things that right-wingers complain about that they're actually very guilty of, if not guilty of more than left-wingers. And so
when did you correct me on this? I'm so confused.
We're talking about cancel culture.
Oh, okay.
And you said, well, don't you think that left-wingers cancel people more than right-wingers? And I was like, no, absolutely not. I think right-wingers cancel people just as much.
Yeah, we had this conversation on like a live stream a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago, yeah. Right-wingers are super sensitive, like every little thing. And I don't know if it's like that they're so sensitive, or they're constantly trying to change the subject from losing policy issues. Like, if we're all talking about, how woke House of the Dragon is, are we ignoring the fact that like they're taking away abortion rights or something like that? Like they do love to change the subject to something they think they can win on. But yeah, they always get upset about these little things like this, and then just they're the biggest snowflakes.
Well, there's something I was actually gonna. I hate mentioning this because I get the hate for it. I was actually because this is something I wanted to bring up with the Witcher stuff. When we do that, it's still on the table, still coming. But I don't know if you recall this. So you know how like we also have to make distinctions between right wingers and incels because they kind of
Mm.
sometimes become intertwined, but they're kind of not. Do you remember
It's
Mando
a it's a
season?
weird it's a weird unholy alliance, right? Like the
Kinda,
fact
yeah.
that what I say is, I always joke and say that there's three types of conservatives, like selfish pricks, fucking assholes, and religious freaks. And it's like you wouldn't actually think that the religious freaks should be selfish assholes, selfish pricks, and fucking assholes. But there's a weird crossover. Like they start bleeding into each other. They start mimicking each other. Um, the fact that I can see a fucking asshole start mimicking like religious talking points is really weird to me. Like why should you be doing that? But yeah, it's a weird unholy alliance. But yeah,
It
continue.
is. But well, what I was trying to say is, do you remember Mando season one? I think it was
Hmm.
episode 4 or 5, um, when Gina Carano first appears. Now, Gina Carano is the
Yeah,
right wing princess, if you will, right?
yeah, yeah.
But do you remember a time when right wingers hated the fuck out of her because she was able to fight Mando to a standstill? They had a problem with her then, and now all of a sudden they don't have a problem her with anymore. I wonder why. I wonder why. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Didn't we what did we discuss? I think it was on our podcast uh about Luke getting defeated by Luke losing a fight against Ahsoka. We brought up that.
No, this is like a whole. I was so tempted to
Yeah.
make a video. I got lambasted in the comment section of this one douchey asshole YouTuber. I'm not gonna say his name because he's so small, but he tried making the insinuation that Ahsoka somehow being stronger than Luke is woke. Homie, she is like 17 years older than him, and she's been like in war and multiple battles. Like I would assume that
And is
Luke is not
actually
even the
trained,
chosen one.
right? It's
Trained
not.
by the
It's not.
chosen one
It's not a fuck.
himself.
Like Luke is just like he's the fucking like Mary Sue, right? He just got his abilities from fucking nowhere.
Right.
Like he was
Luke
never
is kind
trained.
of a Gary Stu, yes. But
Yeah, Gary
Ahsoka would
Stu.
be
Yeah,
stronger than him.
yeah,
So dumb. So dumb.
yeah. Yeah, it's odd, when I mean, granted, like YouTube is all about clickbait, and so we, in this environment, we get a lot of these situations where people want to complain about Brie Larson or whatever, but Brie Larson, yeah, but it's just
What she said was kind of dumb, but Brie Larson represents like that hot girl from high school that rejected all these incels, and therefore they've held that grudge ever since.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, they clipped, they clipped some interview she had, and then, you take a few things here or there. Like, it's also I do think it's funny, and it's not. None of this is rather consistent because then you've got. So when I talk about like the selfish pricks push forward this idea that like the market is like the end all be all, right? And we should rely on the market, right? And then the fucking assholes like come forward and they're like, oh, but I hate it when Disney like is putting forward a diverse cast, or House of the Dragon casts a black person. Like those are capitalists being capitalists. Capitalists gonna capitalize, right? They know that like having a diverse cast brings in more viewers, and so that's the market being the fucking market. So it's like the minute like capitalism starts working like capitalism does, like they complain, oh no, it's a big left-wing conspiracy of wokeness. No, maybe it's the fucking market. Okay. uh
That's such a great point you made. It reminds me of the point that Ben Shapiro made about Trump when
mm,
he was on Bill Maher. He said how Trump is either the greatest mastermind of all time who colluded with Russia to overtake the 2016 election, or he's a dumbass, like all the left wingers like to say. He can't be both. He can't be both. Same with like Disney and all these corporations. They're either super woke and they're only putting in diversity for to be woke and nice, or they're a soulless corporation who only cares about money. You kind of can't be both.
yeah, it's true. This is the somebody brought up, I think, on a previous stream, this idea of like something called like the Great Reset or something. This idea that somehow like all the mutual funds and wealth in the world is going to start going to woke causes, and it's like, I wish, but it's not going to happen. They're going to go to whatever cause is the most profitable because that's what people care about. People care about money, 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 money. Um, The problem with that logic about eating meat as wrong is that there are some people whose bodies can't process plant protein properly. Sure. And like I say, like I don't, I have a really tough time as well in the sense that I don't eat gluten and I don't eat dairy and I don't eat soy. And so it's really tough for me to find, you know, food to eat. And so like, it's good, you know, if I had to cut meat too, it'd be really tough. But, you know, the idea is that we, you know, can the human population eat a fuckload less meat and cause a fuckload less environmental destruction and a fuckload less suffering on the earth? Yeah, it's hard to argue. It's hard to argue against that. Like, um, and there's certain things I do think about. Like, I'd rather eat like I've seen how pigs are raised in America, and it's pretty horrific. And pigs are super intelligent and are super aware of all the pain that they're feeling and things like this. And so, like, if I see free range pork, I'm like, I'm gonna have free range pork. I'm not gonna have this freaking. They raise pigs like veal in America, and so, you know, things like that. So, like, just, you know, we can, everything doesn't have to be such a stark light switch. Like, you can make efforts towards certain things, like, you know, like I eat now like less beef because I know beef is a little more environmental destructive than pork or chicken. And so I like, or lamb. And so I like to switch away from beef because I know how massively destructive beef is. Like, you know, we can make these baby steps. It doesn't have to be like, you know, no one's coming in with a stick and beating you up and being like, you know, stop eating, stop having hamburgers. Like, no one's doing that. Um, so many people have asked me, what do you think of Corlys Velaryon being played by a black man? And honestly, I didn't even notice. I guess I just don't see that sort of thing. But what's kind of funny is that, so in America, like, so the right wingers in America will try to have it both ways. They'll be like, why does everyone want to make such a big deal about race? And then when they cast a white person as a black person, they make a big deal out of it. And it's like, well, you can't have it both ways. Either race is a big deal or it's not, right? And guess what? In America, race is a big fucking deal. Okay. like the fact that on my stream, like, some people were telling me that I shouldn't have married my wife because she's of a different race. Like, that's fucked up. Like, yeah, race is a big deal in America. We had slavery and segregation. It was a big fucking deal. There are areas of town that are black areas of town, and there are areas of town that are white areas of town. And if, as a white person, I go to a certain black area part of town at the wrong time of day, I am going to get robbed or worse. You know, or if you are a black person and go to a white area of town, you're going to get followed by police and asked, like, what the hell are you fucking doing here? Okay, like, this is just the
one time, by the way.
What's that?
Didn't you get robbed one time, by the way, in Baltimore? And they asked you.
I've actually never been robbed in Baltimore. So I've been mugged 5 times in my life, 4 times in America.
Who are these like crazy brave dudes hitting up a guy that's like 6'7" for their money? Who is this person?
Well, okay. Should I go into the list of? Should I go into this story? It's a long. Okay, mugging number 1. First time I was mugged, I was coming home from. I went to college on the south side of Chicago. I was coming home from a party drunk, walking down the street, and 2 guys ran out of nowhere and I just took off running. And I was like, and then they ran up, and I can't even remember if I fell down or they kicked me down. I was, you know, too panicked or drunk to know. And I pulled my wallet out of my pocket, and they like fucking grabbed it and ran off. So that was time 1, which is probably the most traumatic for me because it was the first. Like, I remember that one pretty detailed. Second time was on the safest part of campus, walking, and this car drives by. And I thought it was a little weird because it was 2 guys in the back and 1 guy in the front. And it was really weird. A guy opens his door and he flashes his gun and he's like, get over here. And I just took off running. And I was like, ah! And then they like drove off, and they ended up mugging somebody else that night. Like, they took the guy's winter coat, his shoes. It was brutal. This was like dead of winter, you know. So that was time 2. That was one of them with a gun. Time 3, I'd gone to a Skins game, and we're trying to go back to the metro, and we got a little lost. And these 2 guys like start running up behind us, me and my friend, and I see these guys running, and I immediately know what's up, and I just I take off, like, and so my friend though like turns around and is like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they punch him square in the gut, and they're like, "Give us your money," and he like pulls out like $3 and they run off. And I was like, "Dude, why didn't you run with me?" And my friend, honest to God, said, "I didn't want to look racist." And then,
wait, he'd rather be broke than like.
Well, he only gave him $3, but like, or $6 or something. Fucking crazy, but it was a punch in the gut. My 4th time, I'm walking home, kind of north suburbs of DC, and I'm walking home, and car pulls up, and they go, "Hey," and I look over, and gun barrel is staring right in my fucking face, and they go, or, you know, and they go, "Get over here," and I just take off running. I'm like, "Ah!" and I fucking like, I like jump over a fence and run behind a house, and they like drove off. So, those are the 4 times in America. So of those 4 times, I guess I only lost my wallet once, but clearly my fight or flight like instinct is flight, with the exception of like the one other time that I was almost mugged. I was in Ethiopia, and I was like going to see this lake, and I'm hanging out by this lake, and these 3 dudes, and they're young guys, they, you know, and they look like they're teenagers, but when I talked to them, they actually said they were like 23. But they start talking to me, and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" You know, typical like you're the foreigner in the country kind of conversations. And they're like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Oh, you know, I'm traveling around seeing stuff." And they're like, "Oh, really? Great." And then we talk for a while, and they're like, "Oh, like, are you a Christian? Have you like accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior?" And I'm like, "Nah, not really into." And we talk about religion for a while. We talk for like a good like 30 minutes. We exchange email addresses, fucking this kind of shit. Then I'm like, "Okay, guys, I got to get going." And so I start walking back on the trail out away from the lake, and the dudes start following me. And we're walking up the trail, and I'm like, "Yo, what's up?" And they're like, "Yeah, you need to give us your money." At this point, like, I fucking, like, again, I'm not thinking, and I like puff up my chest, and I'm just like, "I will fucking kill you." And one of the kids picks up a rock and throws it at me. Or a kid, 23-year-old man, picks up a rock and throws it at me, and then they take off running. And I was so fucking pissed. And then the next day, I had this huge bruise on my leg, and I was like, "Oh God," I didn't feel a thing, but like the next day, I had this enormous bruise on my leg. But those are the 5 times. The 5 times I've been almost mugged. 4 times I fucking ran, and 1 time I fucking like out of nowhere was like, "I will fucking kill you," to like three dudes. Like, I don't know what I was fucking thinking, but yeah.
Preston is being very generous. He forgot to mention the fact that I was one of the guys that mugged him. That's how we met. That's how we met. Someone asked this question earlier, how we met. That's how we met. I mugged him. I'm like, "Hey, I know you." Like,
yeah. So it's but race is a big fucking deal. It's a big fucking deal. You have to go every day in urban situations thinking about race. Like these are issues, you know. It's, you know, you have to as to be a good person in America, you have to work every day at trying not to be racist, because you will be. You're kind of born into a situation where your default situation is to see another group as the others. They live in a different neighborhood. They have a different accent. They, you know, they're into different things. They buy different products. They view movies differently. Everything is, you know, it's a complicated world, and race matters. And so but what's funny is in Westeros, race doesn't matter. Like, they didn't have slavery. So they didn't have segregation. It's not that important. So, I don't know, Corlys being black, not that big of a deal. on right versus left, left versus right, canceling. Ben Shapiro's company made a movie on gun control. Would they hire Elliot Page, and would they keep him on after they came out? That's true. Probably not. That's the thing, is there's always these hypocrisies about this. Like the Christian community like hires the same actors to be in their little movies. It's they cancel people. Like, remember when the Dixie Chicks like came out against Bush and then they disappeared, you know? You know, they were canceled. People cancel stuff all the time, you know, boycott stuff all the time. Or, you know, when Captain Marvel came out, everybody like they were like the right winger trolls were like trying to get a boycott of Captain Marvel to prove that this wasn't a what they wanted to see, and it didn't work. But they try this shit all the time. Everybody tries to cancel. Not to mention that like it was right wing trolls that caused Guardians of the Galaxy 3 to disappear. Carmine, Ben Hammer or Matt Hunter? Who are they?
I took care of it.
Okay. Robbery in Baltimore. It was me. Yeah, I've never done it in Baltimore. So the big thing about like, you know, Baltimore, like I grew up there, so I was always younger and much more scared of and much more aware of things in Baltimore. It's very clear in Baltimore the bad parts of town and good parts of town. While in DC, there's a lot more blending, and there's a lot more young people gentrifying areas and stuff like that. And so you get that kind of stuff. But it's Baltimore. It's very clear. Like, you know, you've got MLK. You don't cross MLK. Like everybody kind of knows that, and you know,
it's funny. Professor Flowers wants that ethno state, but she kind of already has it. You just
right.
unofficially, just don't go there. By the way, Glidus had a great fucking Glidus. He knows how to make the funnies. Scroll up a little bit.
Oh yeah. What is this? I mean, I know that he said, "Your watch, give me your watch. Tell me you poisoned the honey locusts." Could you imagine like a Misery situation where like somebody kidnaps George R. R. Martin and like starts asking him all these questions? Oh. Because I'll just tell you. I'll be like, it was House of Paul. Let me see here. Let me. This is a random other question. Do you think the petrodollar system is still necessary? I personally I just see a bunch of like lost opportunities when it comes to like oil and the petro state and things like this. Like so the United States and the world in general is slowly weaning itself off of oil. And man, just imagine if after 9/11, for those that remember 9/11 like very clearly, had George W. Bush, with all of the political capital he had at that point, said, you know what, we're going to put like a 50-cent tax on a gallon of gasoline, and we're going to take that money and we're going to put it into like producing renewable energies so that we can have electric cars and completely get off of like oil. Man, like, yeah, maybe he wouldn't have been able to get away with it for more than 6 months, but in that 6 months, like, just would have had so much fucking money. Or then all the money that we wasted on going into Iraq, if we spent that on like producing renewable energies and like getting off of oil, it would have just been, or at least getting off of foreign oil completely, you know, or whatever. Like get to the point where like domestic supply like meets our demand. Like it just would have been the most liberating fucking thing, right? But instead, you know, we've got like this situation where even small little dips in the price of oil and you know, small little changes can affect the global economy, and politicians worry about GDP growth like so much because that's just the fucking newspaper articles like, oh my gosh, the economy is booming because we had 2.7 growth. Oh, but it's sluggish because we had 2.3% growth. Like fucking like you can fucking notice that in your day-to-day life, you know, without the newspapers like telling us like, oh, we're booming, oh, we're sluggish. Like, fuck off, you know. But politicians are so scared of that they want this like consistent, you know, ample supply of oil at all times. So, you know, we petrodollars, you know, or dollars that we pay to you know, these countries for their oil. It's yeah, it's tough. Like, it's rough. Take some shots, but we should have just fucking gotten off of it, and then we wouldn't have to worry about this kind of stuff. But
By the way, Joni asked a good question right there. Joni, right? Yeah, right there, right under me, about
oh,
Professor Flowers. She was not misunderstood. I just watched the whole Professor Flowers saga with Vaj. No,
mm,
she's smart enough not to say
oh yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
quiet part out loud, which is she hates white people. She uses the word colonizers as a means to like, yeah, like
Yeah, yeah.
she for some reason she thinks giving the land back to the Native Americans, she thinks that she would be allowed to stay. No, she wouldn't. Like,
That's
no,
true.
she wouldn't.
Yeah,
You're
I
going
mean,
to.
right. Like, if you were an American Indians, like, and you took over America, like, what situation would you be in where you're like, you know what, let's kick out all the white people, but let's keep the black people? Like, it's just like, and I'm not, and it's like not in a racist sense, though they probably would be racist, because people forget that not just white people are racist. Like, the other minorities are racist against each other. Like, this is a big thing.
What? Oh, oh my god! Oh my god! What?
But the the but why would you keep it? You know, black people are poorer, you know, than white people. This is just a fact. Like, why would you keep the poorer people in your country? You know, who because they're poorer, you know, create you know, have disproportionate amount of crime or something like that. This is just like, like, from an American Indian perspective, like, why would you do that? You know, like, because like, she's seeing it like some sort of like, I don't know, like something that doesn't even exist. Like, I'm imagining like some hip woke, like ethnically diverse, like, friend group in college that doesn't have any white people, that is like, yeah, we love everybody except white people. But I don't even know if those exist, right? Like, I don't know if like you have these like ethnically diverse, like, minus white people friend groups that somehow, like, people, like an actual POC, people of color friend group. Like, I don't know if that exists. Like, you either have a very diverse friend group that includes white people too, or you have an ethnically homogenous friend group. But I don't know many people that have like a people of color friend group that just doesn't have white people in it, you know. Um, but she's imagining that somehow like America would be that, you know, like some sort of like hip people of color friend group. Everybody but white people welcome. But yeah, no. Yeah. All right, let's not talk about kidnapping George. I was joking. We can't. Where there's no violence, there's no kidnapping George. Please, no, we're not doing that. No, not doing that. What do I think about A Song of Ice and Fire being set in the Thousand Worlds universe? The children of the forest are the Harangans. What are your thoughts on this? I think that'll be interesting. I think it could. I think that it would just, if you were gonna have it, it would just be kind of a tacked on, add on Easter egg kind of thing, hidden at the end. I don't think it's necessarily relevant to the plot. Like, it's such a minor thing about like what happened to the Harangans. Like, it's a background thing in even the Thousand Worlds universe. Like, people don't really care about what happened to the Harangans. It's not the plot of any of the stories. It's just sort of this one little super fan thing that people have noticed. So like, having the children of the forest being the Harangans would please like 10 people, and they're all like in this community. So it's Um, so the um, yeah, people tell me they hate globalism, but then they eat the Hawaiian pizza. I also don't understand like why like bashing globalists. Like I'm just gonna say I'm a fucking globalist. I fucking love it. Love being a globalist. I'm great. It's great. Um, but what I hate is that both on the left and the right, you hear these anti-globalist people, like these people that are like, oh, you fucking neoliberal globalists, or these like um, Ben Shapiro anti-globalist types, and I don't really understand it. Like one, even if America became isolationist, do you think like the rest of the world is going to stop? Like, is that they're going to stop being globalist? Like, and and I'll tell you, man, people will bash NAFTA, but the minute you take away your Chipotle guac, like, fuck, people are going to be like, oh wait, I'm sorry, NAFTA got me Chipotle guac. Fucking never mind. I like NAFTA. You know, you like your Chipotle guac, right? Right, Carmine?
Sure. I still remember like I still remember the joke he made about Duncan Idaho and guac. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh
How
no,
they gave
what?
us extra. How they gave us extra Duncan Idaho and Dune, and I was telling how
Oh
much I love
right.
that, and you're like, he's like guac. You got extra guac. Be happy.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Everybody likes guac. Sometimes they give you the free guac. So why not? Everybody wants some extra Dunkin' Idaho.
Oh, by the way, and to the people like hating on Preston or myself because we watch Vosh every now and then, we can never win with you people. If I say I watch one person or listen to one person, y'all motherfuckers have a reason why I shouldn't. It's just I just don't go into detail about who I watch anymore. Besides
Yeah,
clicking
I mean,
channels.
also it's like anything else. It's like people like hating on Lincoln or something, and like finding some bad things about him, and then like you can like somebody for certain aspects of their personality or like certain things that they did, and then divorce it from other things. Like when I like MLK, I'm not like, yeah, everybody needs to go out and cheat on their wife. Or when I like Thomas Jefferson, I'm not like, dude, like rape a slave. Like you can divorce these things, right? Like, um, Jesus, like, I'm trying to think of like some of the biggest dicks in the world. I don't know, uh, like some people really liked those stupid, um, uh, crap, Chuck Norris memes, right? Chuck Norris is a fucking dick, or Bruce Willis, he's a fucking dick. Like all these people can be dicks, but you can still like their movies, or whatever. I mean, there's a tons of these right wingers that seem to like Ice and Fire, and it's like, well, George, it's kind of it's a really really left wing story from a really really left wing guy. So, um, yeah, but globalism is the shit. I'm like, isn't it? I'm just saying that like I've had a fucking like man, there's so many great things about globalism. Like, first of all, like having food from another country is fucking great. Also, having sex with someone from another country is fucking great. You should all fucking do it. It's fucking great.
Yep.
Okay? These people that are like, oh, globalism, like, oh my God, you're missing out on two of the best things in life. Okay? Man. I mean, you agree with me on this, Carmine, right?
Yes.
Fucking great. Like, what do you what do people fucking what do they don't like about it? People don't like going on vacation. You don't like fucking vacation. And then globalism is just everything from your vacation comes to America, and it's great. Jesus, man, why wouldn't you like what's so bad about globalism, man? Um, Elon Musk is the issue. People got bashed on me for trashing Elon Musk a lot. Elon Musk is fucking just, I don't even know he's just a fucking bonkers nuts dude. I think the electric car would have happened without him, so I don't even know if I want to give him any credit for that. Like, I think there would still be electric car. I mean, if anything, it was Tesla as a company, the idea of making it hip and cool to have an electric car, but um but uh um but man, now all of this fucking Twitter shit, it's just annoying. Like, what is he doing? What is he doing? I don't know. He's just trying. I don't know if he's trying to get attention. He's thinking that he's got to have political aspirations himself, but I don't think he's very good for like producing a stable society overall. Like, even if you're going to say that Tesla like helps the environment with electric cars, like, I don't know if that's all Elon Musk's doing by himself, but can you explain why hate diversity of thought? So here's your problem with diversity of thought. Okay. You're taking the word diversity and you're claiming that diversity is always a fucking good thing. Okay. And that's just not true. Okay. There's plenty of situations where diversity is not a great thing. For instance, say I've got a barrel of wine and you put in a teaspoon of sewage. All right. I've got a diversity of products in there. I'm just making things different. Right. Well, you're also fucking ruining it. Right. So like some thoughts are fucking rotten. Okay. So like this idea that all thoughts are fucking great. And this is fucking kindergarten where I'm like, oh, that's a really fucking great picture you have there, Timothy. Like, no, I'm not gonna like these fucking right-wing idiots that come up with the dumbest fucking thoughts in the world. Do I have to be like, oh, good job, you came up with a thought, even though it's not even original? They're parroting some other stupid person's thought, and then coming forward and be like, well, it may be fucking rotten, and it may be the worst fucking thought. But at least it's diverse. Like, that's your fucking bottom of the barrel scraping, like excuse for like having a shit idea is that it's diverse. Like, fucking A, like, that's just horrible. Like, it's horrible. Like, imagine if I go into like like I run a car company and somebody's like, okay, we want diversity of ideas on like cars that are going to like, be good in the market. And I'm like, okay, how about a car that has the toilet right underneath my fucking butt? Like, everyone would be like, you're a fucking idiot. Like, what, like, and I'd be like, diversity of thought. You guys are persecuting diversity. Like, there's nothing good about like, like, if you've got shitty thoughts, like, there's nothing good about diversity of it. Like, and this is the thing, is the people that, and bringing this back to when people really say diversity, and when people talk about diversity, what they really mean is like diversity of ethnicity and race, right? If one is a racist and one thinks that other ethnicities and races are shit, of course you're going to be against diversity. Okay? So when you're talking about being against diversity of race and diversity of ethnicity, you out yourself by saying you're against that diversity, because you're saying inherently, fuck, I think other races and other ethnicities are shitty. And that's the big difference between thoughts and fucking races and ethnicities. Like, different races and ethnicities are all equal. Maybe not every single practice of every single ethnicity. Like, I'm not going to get into FGM or whatever. But like, generally speaking, ethnicities and races are pretty much equal, and meanwhile thoughts are not. There are very clearly good thoughts and very clearly bad thoughts. Like, why on earth would anyone want diversity of thought? Like, you want good thoughts. Who fucking cares about diversity of thoughts? You want good thoughts. Do I want diversity of good thoughts? Sure, but they've got to be fucking good first. Okay? I don't fucking care about what if I have homogeneous good thoughts, well, homogeneous good thoughts are still good. I would like more good thoughts, so maybe a diversity of good thoughts, but diversity of thought in general, fuck no. Not if your thoughts are shitty. Fucking now you've got me pumped up for spicy.
I'm assuming some of these people are just trying to goad you into.
Well, I mean, I have no idea. I mean, he might be thinking of like somebody else put this argument forward, and he wants to talk about it. So I'm not trashing on this question because he's just explaining why hate on diversity of thoughts, and it's like, well, some thoughts are fucking shitty, and you should not want shitty thoughts. Like if I have a thought that I should, fucking kill my parents, maybe that thought shouldn't be like, put forward. Like, no, let's put forward this idea of killing my parents into the marketplace of ideas and talk about it. Like, fuck you. No, it's just a fucking bad idea. Fuck off. Let's not talk about it. No, maybe we should think about like, the incel idea of using women as chattel and reappropriating them to men that can't get sex. Fuck you. Like, what the fuck? These aren't good thoughts.
That's funny.
Oh, the best analogies for everything. They're mainly just about shit and fucking, aren't they? I'm sorry. My experience in Iceland, I had a really great time. Iceland is super, super, super beautiful. Everybody's really, really friendly. Utterly stunning place. The interesting thing about Iceland is everything's really expensive, but everything's kind of equally expensive. So you might as well have a really fancy dinner because it's not that much more, or it's the same price as something that's not that fancy. But
is Iceland the place that has good hot dogs, or is that Finland?
No, it's Iceland. Iceland has like they all eat these hot dogs. It's Iceland. Yeah, they have these hot dogs that are big in their culture. That
people don't know this about you, but you've been to. Because you won't. I always told for the audience. I always told Preston he should make a Instagram where he uploads all the pictures of all the countries he's been to. Because you've been to almost every single country, right?
I've been to like 115, though. Since COVID, I haven't been anywhere new. So, but
yeah, you've been to 115 countries, and I'm sure you've taken pictures in almost every single one.
Yeah,
people would like to see this stuff. Preston's Travels, or you're maybe a second blog channel.
Yeah, I mean, I have to sort them out, things like that. But yeah, some of them are getting old. The pictures. Me with hair.
You with the hyenas.
Yeah, me feeding hyenas, or yeah, I got some interesting stories that maybe one day I'll tell. But
you definitely should, like a secondary channel where it's like blog or whatever,
Yeah,
because you put some of them on your channel already, where you went to the Game of Thrones sets.
Yeah. I mean, I did videos for my time in Croatia and Iceland. What counts as a country? So I count a country as essentially if they have their own borders and army. So I count Northern Cyprus, Palestine, even Taiwan, and Transnistria are like 4 pseudo countries I've been to that I count. But there's the definition of a country doesn't really make sense because most of the world, for example, recognizes Western Sahara, but there's actually no borders or no government or anything with Western Sahara. It's just part of Morocco. Meanwhile, like most of the world doesn't recognize Taiwan, but Taiwan is like a country in every single respect, like except for like UN recognition, right? They have their own army, their own money, their own borders, their own economy, like passports, things like this. So it's Costa Rica is not a country. It's true. Costa Rica doesn't have a standing army. They it's kind of funny, but at least they have their own borders. There's no perfect definition. Country just, I don't know what you can do. Moldova isn't a country. Moldova is a country, but they have an army. They have to have an army because they had a long war with Transnistria. They definitely have an army. But Transnistria has their own army as well. So, but yeah, Costa Rica is the famous one that doesn't have an army. I'm trying to think, but of course it doesn't really, that definition doesn't really work too well because like that means any like rebel group in a country like is a new country, right? So like any breakaway army like Joe Blow in Montana with his machine gun out in the middle of the boonies is his own country because he's his own army. But it's kind of like you go with like, okay, do they have their own currency? Do they have their own army? Do they have established borders? Do they have UN recognition? So I think the Vatican has these Swiss guards. So, but some of them you can kind of start with the UN recognized countries and then add a few more that have their own army. But it's yeah. And free Ukraine. Like, what do it's like, what do we like? Are the breakaway regions like of Ukraine? Like, would anyone like? Are they part of Russia? Are they new countries? No one kind of knows at this point. So,
by the way, what's going on with the
Moldova isn't really an economy or a government by European standards. It just doesn't matter. It's not that bad. I've been to it. Like they have a government, they have borders, they are the smallest economy of Europe, but they do still have an economy. I mean, come on. But what were you saying? What were you saying, Carmine?
Oh, this Hannah. How is she? Is she okay?
Last time I talked to her, she was in Ireland, but her family's still
that's right.
Ukraine. So I don't know.
Have you heard the rumors that Putin may have cancer?
Yeah, kind of wishful thinking. But cancer, I mean, cancer can take forever.
Cancer or Parkinson's.
Yeah.
Supposedly, because he doesn't stop shaking in certain interviews.
But cancer can take forever to kill you. And so it's tough. I mean, what people wonder about is whether it makes him look weak and therefore like the other powers in his government might pounce on him. But it's all wishful thinking, but we'll see. I don't put too much stock into it. Let's see. I've been on here about 3 hours, so I'd like to say goodbye to everyone. But thank you, Carmine, for joining me again.
Of course.
Oh, I love you, man. Thank you for chatting with me and making me look a little less crazy.
I mean, you might want to go back and remove the bestiality conversation, but
yeah,
I'm right here.
I'm sure it's all going to get clipped. Anyway, thanks everyone. We didn't even talk about the Westerlands, which was the whole point. Anyway, talk to you guys soon. Thanks for being here.